Good morning. It's 7 o'clock. On today's show, we're talking about 3 suspicious fires at Sir Keir Starmer's private home, another property linked to the Prime Minister, and a vehicle.
Plus, Downing Street faces down a backlash from MPs and employers over its immigration reforms. Robert Jenrick is on from the Conservatives in the next few minutes.
And the world's toughest triathlon. We speak to a former Royal Marine who's climbed Everest after swimming, cycling and running more than 8,000 miles.
It's Tuesday, the 13th of May. Your headlines. Counter-terror police launch a probe into a fire at the Prime Minister's townhouse and 2 other sites. Also ahead, Donald Trump flies into Saudi Arabia this morning on the biggest diplomatic tour of his presidency so far. He's due to arrive this hour. Sky News investigates the online drug trade. Free 24-hour delivery advertised by stickers on Britain's streets. Plus, reality TV star Kim Kardashian testifies this morning as a witness in her Paris robbery trial. A very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us here on Sky News Breakfast. We begin with an investigation by counter-terror police into 3 separate fires, all at sites linked to the Prime Minister. Firefighters were called to Sir Keir Starmer's private home in North London in the early hours of Monday morning. And police now say they are also investigating a blaze at another property linked to him and a vehicle. The Prime Minister has thanked the emergency services for their work, but his spokesman said he could not comment any further on a live investigation. Let's bring in Sky's Alice Porter, who's in North London for us now. Alice, what is the latest?
Well, I'm here at the property in Kentish Town, and as you can see from behind me, police are very much still here. Now, they were called to the property, which is just behind me there, and it's this property that is owned by the Prime Minister, and there was clear smoke damage. It took around 20 minutes to bring the fire under control. No one was hurt, fortunately, but 10 firefighters were involved in tackling the blaze. But the concern is of those 3 suspected arson attacks that have happened all in a very close proximity and all locations that are linked to the Prime Minister. So we have this property behind me here, which was very much Keir Starmer's residence before moving to Downing Street when he became Prime Minister. And that took place in the early hours of Monday morning. But in the early hours of Sunday morning, there was then an additional fire in Islington, which is just under 3 miles from where I am. And that's another property linked to the Prime Minister. And then there was an additional fire on this very street, a car fire, on Thursday last week. Now, we've got a statement from the Metropolitan Police commenting on these 3 different arson attacks, and it says the investigations team are also considering 2 other incidents: a vehicle fire in NW5 on the 8th of May and a fire at an entrance of the property in N7 on the 11th of May, and are investigating whether there may be linked to the fire in NW5 on the 12th of May. At this early stage of the investigation, officers are working to establish the circumstances of all 3 fires and are keeping an open mind as to whether there is any connection. Both incidents are being treated as suspicious at this time, and inquiries remain ongoing. Now, counter-terrorism police are leading on the investigations into these fires. Of course, because of Sir Keir Starmer being a Prime Minister, a very public figure, there will of course be concerns to his safety and that of his family as well. The property behind me was very much his family home before taking over in Downing Street. It was this property that continues to be owned by him. Fortunately, no one has been hurt in these 3 fires, but police are investigating to see what the connection is between the 3 fires.
Alice, thanks so much for that update. By the way, we're going to be talking to the Home Secretary later this morning, 8:45 a.m, a slightly later time slot than normal. Of course, we'll ask her about that, amongst many other things. Now, the Prime Minister has been criticised by some Labour MPs over the language he used describing an island of strangers in his statement on immigration. Mari is here with us. Mari, just snapshot the sort of pushback, particularly from inside his own party, on this rhetoric.
Yeah, so Keir Starmer's been criticised quite heavily for some of the rhetoric that you just referenced, and that's partly because even some Labour MPs who agree with the policy direction or even the policies that were announced yesterday themselves, they're very unhappy about the language. Haven't got time to reel off them all, but just to give you a highlight, so John McDonnell has said that it's echoing the divisive language of Enoch Powell. Nadia Whittome has said that it's actually emboldening racial abuse, that kind of language emboldens that. Clive Lewis talking about how they're bleeding more voters from Liberal to the Liberals than they are to Reform. And I could go on. So a lot of pressure on the PM in terms of the rhetoric that he's using around immigration.
Murray, great stuff for that. Murray just set that up for us. It's going to be the topic du jour here for our political interviews. And Robert Jenrick joins us at 7:15. We're going to go into it in detail with him. As I said, the Home Secretary at 8:45. But we wanted to get now to the other top story of the day in Saudi Arabia, where Donald Trump is due to touch down in the next 30 to 40 minutes. Delighted to say that we're able to bring in our Mark Stone now, who's in Riyadh for us. Mark, extraordinary scale of expectation there must be where you are.
Huge expectation, huge excitement. I think opulence is the word of the week. I think these three Gulf Arab nations, Saudi Arabia, Qatar and the United Arab Emirates, are going to do whatever they can to outdo each other as they welcome this transformative American president to the region. His first foreign trip, he went to the Pope's funeral, of course, but this is his first diplomatic trip of his second term. He's choosing to come first to Saudi Arabia, just as he did in his first term. But, you know, so much has changed. This region has changed. Saudi Arabia, other Gulf Arab countries are much more politically confident now. Saudi Arabia sees itself as a regional, perhaps even a global power broker. If it was the case in his first term that the Saudis, the Gulf Arab countries, needed America more than America needed them, well, I think that relationship is rather more balanced now. On the face of it, this trip is going to be all about trade or all about money. The Saudis, for example, have said they will invest $1 trillion over 4 years in the United States. These are eye-watering numbers. They probably don't actually meet reality. Nevertheless, it is big investment by the Gulf into the United States. For Donald Trump's base at home, for his supporters at home, for people who might doubt his ability to make America great again, well, that is what he will point to. He is going to the Middle East to encourage them to spend money. It's about defense pacts as well between Gulf Arab countries and the United States. America selling weapons to the Middle East. But behind all that, of course, and wrapped up in all of it, Wilf, is geopolitics. And it feels like at the moment Donald Trump is galloping away on multiple horses at the same time. It's hard to know which ones he will fall off. But in Trump style, if he does fall off one, he'll probably leave that behind and focus on another. He wants to come away from this first foreign trip of his second term with diplomatic wins and with lots of money in his back pocket as well to invest in the United States. So, you know, we just don't know which of the global issues will be the dominant one this week. There was a time only a couple of weeks ago that there was an expectation that Vladimir Putin might be here in Saudi Arabia. There would be some sort of a bilateral between Putin and Trump. That is not going to happen now. But as we've been talking about over the past few days, there is perhaps some momentum on a peace process in the Ukraine war. Remember, the Saudis have been key in brokering talks between the Russians and the Americans. They were here just a few weeks ago. So maybe we will see some developments there. What about the Middle East, of course? A massive challenge in Gaza. Trump, in his first term, pushed forward what's known as the Abraham Accords, normalization, diplomatic normalization between the Saudis, potentially other Gulf Arab nations as well, and the Israelis. That at the moment is off the table, but there is leverage there. The Saudis are more powerful now than they once were. If Donald Trump wants normalization to happen in the region, which would transform the region, then the Saudis can say to him, well, look, you need to put pressure on the Israelis to sort out the Palestinian problem, to recognize Palestine as a state. I have to say that feels like a very long way away. way now. He arrives shortly in the next hour or so, Air Force One, the old one, not the new one that Qatar might gift him. The old Air Force One is in the air, will land here in Riyadh over the next hour, and there will be a welcoming ceremony with the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman there, and then an investment conference here in the capital before things get underway with a state dinner tonight. Look out too for a drone show. I'm told there will be a massive drone show put on here in Riyadh for the leader.
Mark, thanks so much for that. Mark Stone for us there in Riyadh. We're going to be back out with Mark and with Yalda at about 7:45 when the President of the United States is expected to land there in Saudi Arabia. We've got a bit more breaking news coming on that first story we brought you with Alice Porter about the fire at the Prime Minister's home in Kentish Town. The UK police statement say man arrested in connection with the arson attacks in North London. The second statement coming out on this is saying it was in connection with arson attacks, in North London, and going on to say that it includes at one property linked to a high-profile public figure. Of course, is arsimation. It's relating to the story we talked about earlier. This says the arrest relates to 3 separate incidents. Again, relates to what we said earlier. And counter-terrorism officers are leading the investigation into the incident. I can just bring you a little bit more that's coming across now. So a man has been arrested in connection with a series of arson attacks. The 21-year-old was arrested in the early hours of this morning, Tuesday, on suspicion of arson with intent to endanger life. He remains in custody. The arrest relates to 3 incidents. On Monday, the 12th of May at 1:35 a.m, police were alerted by the London Fire Brigade to reports of a fire at a residential address in NW5. Officers attended that scene. Damage was caused. Nobody was hurt. Just having a little scroll through further down, this officers from the Counter-Terrorism Command have been leading this investigation. Inquiries are ongoing at this time. The team also considered 2 other incidents, a vehicle fire in NW5 on Thursday, the 8th of May, and a fire at the entrance of a property in N7 on Sunday, 11th of May, and investigating whether they might be linked to that fire in NW5. Yesterday, all 3 fires treated as suspicious. Inquiries ongoing, but we are hearing this morning from the Met that this arrest this morning relates to 3 incidents, including 1 at a property linked to a high-profile public figure. And Leah, this has been developing pretty quickly over the last 12 hours, 24 hours or so.
Yeah, this was linked to 2 properties, linked to the Prime Minister and a vehicle. And counter-terrorism officers, as you say, leading this investigation, now saying that these 3 incidents, 1 at a property linked to the Prime Minister, they've made an arrest into this. Alice Porter was saying, our correspondent earlier on, that obviously no one was hurt in this incident or at the second property or the vehicle, but of course this is linked to the Prime Minister. This is a matter of urgency for counter-terrorism officers, and this will be an ongoing situation, despite the arrest being made, of course. And just to reiterate those details that you said there, Wilfred, a 21-year-old was arrested on the early hours of Tuesday, the 13th of May. This was on suspicion of arson with intent to endanger life, and this individual remains in custody. And this man, his actions are in relation to those 3 incidents that we mentioned. So hopefully we'll be able to speak to Alice Porter shortly. She's on location for us. And we saw the pictures, didn't we, of the damage caused to the entrance of the property.
And just a reminder, this all kind of unfolded yesterday with this first incident at the Prime Minister's former home. He still owns the property, but it's rented out in Kentish Town area where we saw Alice outside of earlier. And then in the later hours yesterday, it started to emerge that a couple of other incidents could potentially be linked to it. And it seems the news this morning is that somebody has been arrested in relation to all 3. Just a reminder, by the way, that Robert Jenrick is going to be joining us any minute now, initially to talk about immigration, but perhaps we can get his view on this. But also the Home Secretary will be joining us at 8:45 a.m. So we will, of course, put these details to her as well. So you want to make sure you stay tuned for that. Yes, just to reconfirm that a 21-year-old man was arrested in the early hours of this morning. Let's get more details on that. Alice Porter is able to join us once again from outside the property.
Yeah, this is quite a significant update that we've got from the Metropolitan Police. That a 21-year-old man was arrested in the early hours of this morning on suspicion of suspected arson, and that is in relation to 3 different fires that have taken place, all different areas and properties that are connected with Sir Keir Starmer. Now, the 21-year-old man in question, he does remain in custody. Now, what we know is police were called to the suspected arson attack on this property behind me here in Kentish Town. It was the property of Sir Keir Starmer, and was living there with his family before he took over in Downing Street. So it was this fire at the property behind me here. It's very much a police presence continues to be operating. That fire happened in the early hours of yesterday morning, but then there was an additional fire on Sunday morning as well, and that was a property in Islington, just a couple of miles from where I'm from. And then on Thursday last week, there was then a suspected car fire on this very road. So there is 3 different fires that have taken place in a very short space of time, in a very short area, all connected to the Prime Minister. And that is why counter-terrorism police have been taken over the operations. Now, we understand that a man has been arrested in connection with all of those 3 suspected arson attacks. So there's clear some very quick work by the police in apprehending him. He remains in police custody on suspected arson, for those suspected arson attacks.
Great stuff, Alice, for that. And just give us an update on the vibe there where you are. I mean, it does sound like this fire was thankfully limited, but no doubt still came as a shock to the residents of that otherwise quiet street.
Yeah, this is a very quiet area in Kentish Town, and people very much going about their day, and many of which I think perhaps the property behind me that is owned by Sir Keir Starmer is rented out, and presumably there may be people in the street who didn't quite know the connection to the Prime Minister. But you can see from the property there are scorch marks where the fire happened, presumably in the kind of porch area is where the flames really took off. It took about 20 minutes to bring the fire under control here. 10 firefighters were tackling the blaze. But I think there was also concern of the other property that's linked to Sir Keir Starmer in Islington, just a couple of miles where I'm from. And we understand that 1 woman had to be evacuated out of the property. Now, luckily, no one has been hurt in these 3 separate fires, these 3 suspected arson attacks. But there could be this property behind me, certainly, as you can see, it's a residential property, as in it's got flats. And there will, of course, be concern to the people there, and as well as people in the street as well, about any potential concern from the fire. But we now have heard that update just in the last 5 minutes or so, that a 21-year-old man has been arrested in connection with a series of fires. So the property here in Kentish Town, the property in Islington, and the fire that took place here on the street in a vehicle.
Alice, great stuff as always. Thanks so much for that. We're going to be back out with Alice Porter throughout the morning as and when we get more details on that story. But let's get reaction now from the former Immigration Minister, the Shadow Justice Secretary, Robert Jenrick, who joins me. A very good morning to you. Thanks.
Good morning.
What's your reaction to the arrest, but also this story as has evolved over the last 24 hours?
Well, it's obviously a very concerning story, and it's right that the police take it very seriously. I can't comment on a live police investigation, as I don't know the details. But it's important that the Prime Minister and anyone in public life has their family, their homes protected. You know, we have robust disagreements in politics, but I want to ensure anyone who chooses to go into public life feels that they'll be properly protected and that we have civility in our debate. It's absolutely wrong, disgraceful for any individual to take the kind of action that we saw against the Prime Minister's home.
Do you fear for safety of yourself and other parliamentarians, given what's happened in recent years, when little moments like this do raise their heads?
Well, unfortunately, there is a pattern, isn't there, now, where we've seen a number of members of Parliament losing their life, attacks on other members of Parliament, and now attacks of this nature. I've had protesters. I've had people attacking my own home, intimidating my family. We've received death threats. This isn't unusual. It's right that politicians, particularly the most prominent ones like the Prime Minister, have all the protection that they need so that them and their families feel safe.
I didn't know that, that you've had death threats, and I'm sorry to hear that. And I'm almost equally shocked and sorry to hear that you say it's not unusual. Is it become a matter of course to receive death threats in Parliament?
Well, I know a number of other MPs who've had similar situations, so I think it is relatively common. I just don't want to see good people put off going into politics. That's what's important. And those of us who choose to go into politics, myself, the Prime Minister, that's different to our husbands, wives, children. We need to ensure that the families of people in public life are properly protected. And that's why it's important that the police take all the action they need to protect the Prime Minister and his homes.
I guess you just touched on this in your first answer, but we're about to move on to talking about the immigration white paper. I'm sure you're going to disagree quite significantly with the government, but only with your words, always. Is that fair to say? Is that the important lesson from this?
Absolutely. I want there to be a civil debate in this country, and there will be issues on which we profoundly disagree, Keir Starmer, myself and the Conservative Party with our opponents. But the debate in this country has to be one which is a respectful one, and we cannot allow individuals, potentially this person who's been arrested today, to intimidate people out of public life.
Let's move on and talk about the immigration white paper. This was always going to be my first question. I wonder if there are some items in it, I've seen your tweets already, but some line items of the sub-policies within it, some of which you agree with?
I think there were some decent things within the announcement. I support the idea that you should take longer when you arrive in this country to receive indefinite leave to remain and have a right to remain here for forever. I think it's important that we expect higher standards of English for people who come to this country than we have in recent years. But I think this is going an inch when we need to run a mile. This is not going to stop the boats. This is not going to end the era of mass migration. This is not going to enable us to get foreign criminals off our streets and out of the country. When I listened to the Prime Minister's press conference yesterday, I frankly didn't believe a word that he said. It looked like a hostage situation where a man was reading out the words that his advisors had written, but which he blatantly didn't believe in. He's somebody who has built a life, a career, a circle of friends, a worldview, which is open borders. He signed letters trying to frustrate the removal of foreign criminals from our country. He stood for the leadership of the Labour Party on a platform of restoring freedom of movement. He's trying to con the public with an elaborate trick that he is going to tackle these issues, when we know that he isn't. He's going to be just another politician who makes promises on immigration only to break them. And that has been something that politician after politician has done in recent decades, since Tony Blair, the founding father of mass migration, started this issue 25 years ago. And it's led to massive corrosion and erosion of public trust and confidence.
I guess in terms of broken promises when it comes to immigration and hard numbers to back that up, that your party and a government that you're a part of has a bigger question to answer on that point.
Well, I've been the most painfully honest about the mistakes of the last Conservative government. I think catastrophic errors were made. They are in a line that goes right back to Tony Blair, who started this period of mass migration. But I don't pretend that they were the right decisions. I think they were bad decisions, and they're ones that we need to be honest about. What needs to happen now, though, is change. We need action. You know, I ultimately resigned from government because I wasn't willing to be just another politician who made promises on immigration and then broke them. And I think you're going to see Keir Starmer, Yvette Cooper consigned to the dustbin of history of prime ministers and home secretaries who talk big but don't take the action that's necessary.
I guess when you resigned, it was specifically in relation to the Rwanda bill, which was obviously aimed...
It was both that and legal migration. I campaigned for a year to persuade the then Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, to bring into place measures that would reduce legal migration. We secured the biggest ever changes that will lead to 300,000 fewer people coming into this country. We're just starting to see that in the data that's emerging. But when I couldn't persuade him of any more, I chose to resign as a matter of principle. If only the current crop of Labour politicians had the same backbone, but they don't. They're talking big, the actions that they're taking are not going to have the impact that they desire. And I don't think they want to. I don't think they believe in the nation-state, in borders. I don't think they back British workers.
So let's talk about kind of having the principle and the backbone. Is your view, and I've seen your comments about whether this only tackles Article 8 of the ECHR and not Article 3, is your position that the country should pull out of the ECHR?
Well, the Conservative Party's position is...
What's your position?
Well, I'll answer your question, but I'm here to represent the Conservative Party. Our position under Kemi Badenoch is that, at a minimum, we should disapply the Human Rights Act. Now, that, for all immigration matters, and that will have a big impact, because that ensures that you can't have illegal migrants misusing our human rights laws to frustrate their removal. What Labour have proposed is a very limited intervention, where they're looking at one article of the ECHR, not others. It's not going to have the impact. It'll easily be circumvented by illegal migrants and lawyers bringing into play vexatious legal actions. What the party has also said is that we're going to consider whether that in itself is enough or whether we actually need to leave in its entirety the European Convention on Human Rights. I have a long-standing position on that. The party is considering that and is going to come forward with its view later in the year.
I mean, I come back to this point. So you criticise the government of not having a backbone on this. You say that you've been very clear to criticise aspects of the last Conservative government and why you resigned. Would you like your leader and the party to move quicker and clearer on this? I mean, it sounds like you want to leave the ECHR. We've had 9 months since the election. You're criticising the government for not going far enough. Do you want your party to go further?
Well, I've made my view clear on that. But
so you want to leave the ECHR?
But the party has got a process in place now. Kemi Badenoch has said...
Is the process too slow?
No, I think it's perfectly valid for the Conservative Party to consider this carefully, but it has brought forward, and in fact we voted on it yesterday in the House of Commons, a very significant change, which would be to disapply the Human Rights Act, which would have a profound impact on the ability of illegal migrants and their legal representatives to frustrate our system. And, just as importantly, we've said that we're going to bring into place a capped system for legal migration. And that means that, for once, the public can actually have confidence that the big promises being made by politicians will actually be delivered upon, because Parliament will have set a legally binding cap on the visas being issued by the Home Office.
I mean, it still remains to be seen why taking your time can't mean 9 months as opposed to a bit longer. Just quick final question on this. Coming back to some of the rhetoric, immigration has done incalculable damage to this country, and we risk becoming an island of strangers, words of the Prime Minister yesterday. Do you agree with those words?
I think we already are. I think there are certain places in this country where people are not living side by side, where we are a very divided, segregated society. If you look at the centre of Bradford, for example, 50% of people were not born in the UK. If you look at the centre of Luton, almost 50% of people only arrived in the UK in the last 10 years. If you look at parts of Dagenham, the white British population has reduced by 50% in the last 25 years.
Is that a problem?
So I think, well, the pace of change is immense, and people are sick of that. People want to see mass migration ended. They want to return to the levels of immigration that we have enjoyed as a country.
Why is it a problem if the percentage of white people has fallen or risen?
Because you can't successfully integrate people at this speed into our country.
But why does the colour of their skin matter?
It's not about the colour of someone's skin. It's about whether or not someone has just arrived in our country. And if you have places...
But that is a different point,
If you have places...
That is a different point.
If you have places like the centre of Bradford, where half the population has only just arrived in our country, how can you expect those people to know our history, our heritage, our norms, our traditions, to be well integrated? If you see profound change in a community like Dagenham, where within 25 years, the people living in the community has changed almost beyond recognition, understandably, some people who live there will feel that the place that they knew no longer exists. And that is why people are so frustrated and angry at the decisions that politicians have made in recent years, why we have to take action. And frankly, nothing that was said yesterday is going to make a difference. It's not going to stop the boats. It's not going to end the era of mass migration. The Labour Party themselves have said it's only going to make a tiny difference, maybe 50 or 100,000 fewer people coming in every year. That's not good enough.
We're out of time. Thank you for joining us, Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick. We'll take a break here on The Breakfast Show. When we come back, there's a sense of course, of expectation in Riyadh ahead of the arrival of the US President Donald Trump. He's due any minute now. We'll be live in Riyadh when we come back.
Show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first.
Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display.
I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's futures.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. But this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Welcome back to the Breakfast Show. Well, coming up in just a moment, we'll have more on the breaking news that a man was arrested in connection with a series of arson attacks at sites linked to the Prime Minister. But first, all of your day's top stories. She is here.
I am here. Thank you very much for bearing with. A man has been arrested in connection with 3 arson attacks, including one at a site linked to the Prime Minister. The 21-year-old was arrested in the early hours of this morning on suspicion of arson with an intent to endanger life. He remains in custody. Elsewhere, Sir Keir Starmer is facing criticism after announcing his plans to cut net migration, with care worker visas being scrapped. While the new reforms are looking to reduce the number of people coming to the UK by up to 100,000 per year. Donald Trump's tour of the Middle East begins today. He's due to arrive in Saudi Arabia's capital, Riyadh, in the next few minutes, actually, to meet the country's leader, Mohammed bin Salman. He'll then travel to Qatar before finally finishing his trip in the United Arab Emirates. And American-Israeli hostage Edan Alexander has been reunited with his family in Israel. He was released by Hamas as a goodwill gesture towards the Trump administration, bypassing Israel in an attempt to renew peace negotiations. Well, the US president described it as a step towards putting an end to the war.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks so much for that. Right, let's get a little bit more on some of the reaction to that top story of the day, that a man's been arrested in connection with arson attacks including one site linked to the Prime Minister. And it was something we spoke about with Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, earlier, in terms of the level with which it makes MPs fear for their safety. Let's have a listen.
Well, it's obviously a very concerning story, and it's right that the police take it very seriously. I can't comment on a live police investigation, as I don't know the details. But it's important that the Prime Minister and anyone in public life has their family, their homes protected. You know, we have robust disagreements in politics, but I want to ensure anyone who chooses to go into public life feels that they'll be properly protected and that we have civility in our debate. It's absolutely wrong, disgraceful for any individual to take the kind of action that we saw against the Prime Minister's home.
Do you fear for safety of yourself and other parliamentarians, given what's happened in recent years, when little moments like this do raise their heads?
Well, unfortunately, there is a pattern, isn't there, now, where we've seen a number of members of Parliament losing their life, attacks on other members of Parliament, and now attacks of this nature. I've had protesters, I've had people attacking my own home, intimidating my family. We've received death threats. This isn't unusual. It's right that politicians, particularly the most prominent ones like the Prime Minister, have all the protection that they need so that them and their families feel safe.
Mari's here to discuss some of the takeaways of that. I mean, what was striking, Mari, wasn't just, the revelation that he's faced death threats, but he seemed to suggest it's very normal for MPs to face death threats.
Yeah, it's really depressing, but it is really, really normal. We have had in the past MPs that have not been able to hold surgeries face-to-face because of death threats that they've had or intelligence that police have had about possible threats. We've had MPs who've had to have panic buttons fitted in their children's bedrooms. Unfortunately, this happens all the time, and it is a stark reminder of the fact that actually, as Robert Jenrick was outlining, irrespective of which way you vote or what your beliefs are when it comes to your politics, nobody deserves to be threatened, attacked or intimidated, especially not their family, who don't choose to be in politics as well. But the fact that he was so blasé about it, I think, indicates how widespread this issue is. It really speaks to a wider problem.
I just want to pivot to hit a different topic that we touched on with him, and not even the specifics of the immigration white paper. We've got obviously more to discuss on that, including with the Home Secretary. What about the implication there, where he was saying that he felt that Kemi Badenoch should go further, or that the party should go further with its policies, specifically as it relates to the ECHR? He didn't say it explicitly, but he was fairly implicit.
Yeah, I think the thing about Robert Jenrick's position is because it is so widely known, he has essentially tried to say that Kemi Badenoch needs to come round to his way of thinking and that, eventually she'll get there, as it were. I think partly it's because a lot of people feel that Kemi Badenoch maybe won't be the leader by the next time we have a general election, and perhaps it'll be Robert Jenrick. And therefore, he knows he's in a decently strong position because he's set out from the beginning what his views on the ECHR is. And then if Kemi does move to his side, he can say, I told you so. And if she doesn't, that fuels his argument, as it were, that he's the tough one on immigration and he's the only one that can save the UK from, the kind of things he was talking about in Bradford, Dagenham and Luton, for instance. It's just, the really difficult thing for Robert Jenrick is this kind of Damascene conversion where he was nicknamed Robert Generic for a long time. He was considered a one-nationer, a centrist, a wet, that's a nickname for the One Nation wing of the Conservative Party, to now have gone from that to what people feel is, a kind of Nigel Farage impersonator to an extent, is quite a shift in a very short space of time. And I think the worry for Robert Jenrick in terms of his campaigning, if he decides he wants to campaign at any point for leader, is going to be, will people buy that transition and how quickly it happened and the timing of it.
Well, we know he wants to. He's done it once before, so that's not a revelation. But anyway, Mari, great stuff, as always. Much more from Mari, of course, throughout the morning. Now, I just want to give you another snapshot, a reminder of the live scene at Riyadh's King Khalid International Airport. We're expecting Air Force One to land any moment now. We're going to have a few live when it happens. Yalda and Mark both there for us. Looking forward to that coverage of this extraordinarily important Middle East trip for the US president. We'll be back there live shortly. And more in the meantime, on one of our top stories of the day, that Hamas has freed an Israeli-American hostage, offering a goodwill gesture towards the Trump administration. 21-year-old Eden Alexander was the first hostage to be released since Israel ended a ceasefire in March. Let's bring in now Nivi Feldman from the Hostages and Missing Families Forum UK. Thanks so much for joining us. Good morning to you. What did you make of this news and the wonderfully positive pictures of seeing him reunited with his family?
Firstly, thank you so much for having me on. It was, a happy but bittersweet day yesterday. So it's a miracle that he came out of Gaza after 584 days in captivity. He needed, as he walked out of Gaza, as he was handed to the Red Cross, it's reported that he needed help to get into the car. He couldn't walk by himself. We have reports that he's been shackled and cuffed in a very small tunnel for most of the time. And for some of the time, he was in an actual cage, just so to understand what he's been through. And it's really, it's such amazing pictures to see him finally reunited. You see with his younger brother there, that was a lot shorter when he went into captivity 2 years ago, and with his sister and his parents. New Jersey been waiting for him, America's been waiting for him, Israel's been waiting for him, and we're still waiting for the other 58 hostages.
Does it give you hope? Or, as I guess you've alluded to, there's a sort of bittersweet nature to your reaction?
So firstly, there is hope. We're seeing that he came out, that there is a delegation from Israel to talk about further ceasefire and hostage release on the way to Qatar right now, which is really good news. But it's bittersweet, we are very fearful that some hostages will come out, and then there'll be some that they'll just be left in Gaza in captivity forever. Just as collateral. We don't know if Hamas can ever, after what they've done, and so many times they haven't acted in good faith, can they actually follow through? Are they doing this, out of goodwill because they want to end the war and want to get to a resolution, or they just want more conflict and more, to cause more hurt to the families that now don't know if their loved ones, that some of them aren't dual nationals, are they going to have also someone fighting for them, their corner, to take them out of Gaza?
There was clearly a US-specific aspect to this particular hostage release. Could the UK government be doing more?
I believe all governments can be doing more. UK today has 2 English parents that have their kids still held in Gaza. We have Avinatan Or, 32-year-old, been taken from the Nova Festival, his mom, Disa Or, with a British passport, agonizingly waiting for him for 585 days. We have Shai Levinson, a young guy, a young soldier. He was 19, defending the border when he was attacked. His father, Kochav Levinson, also holds a British passport. They're waiting for them. It's an English conflict. We had an English hostage. I think England could be negotiating for the, linked hostages to England to say, what can we do to ensure they come out, to ensure that Red Cross sees them, to ensure that the body of Shai Levinson comes back. There's also Alon Ohel that has a cousin in London waiting for him. We have Ilan Weiss, another hostage that has family in England. It is not just an Israeli-Palestinian conflict. At the time of the abduction, 7th of October 2023, there were over 22 nationalities being held hostage. Today, we still have so many nationalities. We have English, we have German, we have Portuguese, Serbian, Romanian, American, Canadian. It's not just an Israel issue.
Just finally, what is your view towards Prime Minister Netanyahu at this stage when you see firm actions, firm plans ahead to come and firm rhetoric? Does it sacrifice the remaining hostages?
I really hope it's not. I hope it's opened a really, a good opportunity to sit down and figure out a way to bring all the hostages home. And as you know, Hamas, the terrorist group that took them, they have any opportunity they want to release them and let them go without any conditions. It's not okay that they're holding them shackled, without water, without oxygen, without food, beating them up, raping them. It's not okay, and they can stop it. And when they'll release them, this whole, resolution will come and peace can finally start.
Nivi, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Nivi Feldman there. Still to come here on The Breakfast Show. Here is the scene at Riyadh's King Khaled International Airport, waiting for the arrival of the US President. We'll have it for you live.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's Senior Ireland Correspondent.
It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century.
I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
If there's anyone who might know how to fix Northern Ireland's devolved government, it's the American architect.
Changes in circumstance require changes in approach.
The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland.
I confirmed that I am willing to take up the office of First Minister. My election to the post of First Minister demonstrates the change that's happening on this island.
Catholics and Protestants on different sides, now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19 and end up in hospital, religion's nothing.
People here are adept at finding hope amid adversity. That's the spirit of a place that punches way above its weight. We help you understand the world with us. A toxic blue-green algae now poisoning Lough Neagh. It's breaking your heart what has happened here.
It is.
This is a vital resource, a national treasure, now fighting for its very life. They are effectively surrounded by Northern Ireland, and that makes this the most unlikely of international frontiers.
If there's a hard border, I think it'll cripple the country.
Winter is coming. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama. Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record. Sky News, the full story first.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party.
I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Welcome back. This is the scene at Riyadh's King Khaled International Airport. We're expecting President Trump's arrival any moment now. We're going to go to it live, as and when we see Air Force One on approach.
Now, a former Royal Marine has completed the world's longest triathlon. That's swimming, cycling, running and climbing more than 8,000 miles. Mitch Hutcroft.
Climbing as well. I thought it was just the first 3.
Oh, my goodness. He's pretty much a superhuman.
Yeah.
We're about to talk to him. He set off from Dover on the 15th of September and reached the summit of Everest on Sunday, raising more than £13,000 for charity. We can see Mitch now. Oh, my goodness, Mitch. So you're in Nepal right now. Talk us through the entire challenge and how you're feeling.
Yeah, as you can hear, I'm absolutely exhausted.
Oh, bless you.
Only finished climbing yesterday morning. Yeah, so this is day 237. I set off on the 15th of September, swam the English Channel, then cycled 12,000 k across the world to India, to sea level in India. Then I ran 900 k from sea level in India to Kathmandu, trekked from Kathmandu 360 kilometres to Everest, and I climbed it yesterday morning.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I'm just completely blown away by this. When you say that the longest, hardest triathlon ever, I mean, I have no doubt that that's accurate. Is it it's a sort of quadrathlon though, really, isn't it?
Yeah, 5-stage, yeah. So swim, cycle, run, trek, and climb. Actually, the longest climb of Mount Everest in history.
I mean, just any one of those things is extraordinary, but most notably the last one, on its own, would be almost impossible. Sorry, one quick final thought. Sorry, because we do have to go to a different story. But the climb, was it the hardest of all of these things? I mean, as remarkably hard as all of them were.
It was probably the channel swim, just followed by the climb. Yeah, it's all for an amazing course. So it was great.
Wow. Well, listen, congratulations. Extraordinary. And I'm sorry we didn't have a bit more time to cover it with you. We'd love to have you back on when you're back in the UK. Thanks so much, Mitch, for joining us. Right, let's pivot now to those live pictures. As you can see, Air Force One has just touched down at King Khalid International Airport in Riyadh. President Trump due to step off, obviously, in just a little while. We are going to be joining Yalda and Mark in just a moment, not currently. But there is Air Force One, the world-famous plane that, of course, transports the president around the world. Albeit there might be a new plane on its way for the president as well in due course. Just touching down there in King Khalid International Airport, as Mark Stone was telling us before, there is extraordinary, opulent expectation ahead of his greeting. It's the first official foreign trip. He briefly, of course, did go to Rome for the Pope's funeral, and he did go as well briefly to France in between the election victory and the inauguration. But this is the first official trip. He'll be going to the UAE, to Qatar as well, and all three of those nations sort of competing for favour with President Trump. But really striking that his first two foreign trips in each of his presidency has been to Saudi Arabia. And that relationship was tested, of course, with MBS halfway through his first term with the killing of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi. But at the moment, the relationships are very, very strong once again, not just between the US and Saudi Arabia, but a lot of the Western world at the moment. And President Trump there has touched down in Saudi Arabia. We're going to bring in Yalda Hakim and Mark Stone in just a moment.
Just some of the details though, the day ahead, Will, for a lavish state dinner is planned a bit later on because, of course, Trump meets Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman.
Yalda's able to join us now. Yalda, break down for us the significance of this from the perspective of Middle Eastern leaders, from the perspective of Saudi Arabia in particular. A lot of countries always compete to get the first newly elected US president's foreign trip. To get the first one twice for Donald Trump is hugely significant for MBS.
Yeah, absolutely, Wilf. As you say, this is a historic trip which he will begin here in Riyadh, in the Saudi capital. As we can see images, Air Force One has just landed. He was due here about 9:45 a.m. local time, so his plane has more or less landed on time. And this, as you say, is the beginning of an incredibly historic week, not just for the Middle East, but for the United States as well. You remember in 2017, it's almost 8 years to the day that Donald Trump made a very similar trip to the kingdom. And at the time, he talked about $450 billion in investments in weapon sales. The weapon sales that Rex Tillerson, the then Secretary of State, talked about was well over $100 billion. And then there was some criticism at the time about how this actually panned out and evolved, whether some of the deals actually did come to fruition. Some of the deals were so preliminary that they weren't quite sure if they'd get off the ground. But he has decided to make the Gulf states his first diplomatic tour again of his second presidency. And the Saudi Crown Prince has already pledged about $600 trillion in investment. So this trip is going to be about big business and big investments. And for the Saudis, as well as the Emiratis, the United Arab Emirates and Qatar, it's also about security, and security. Big investments when it comes to weapons sales, for example, or technology around AI. And Donald Trump will be bringing some of those CEOs like Elon Musk, for example, or the CEO of OpenAI, Sam Altman, former CEO of OpenAI, Sam Altman, here with him as well, because there will be, alongside that lavish state dinner that we've talked about this evening, a big US-Saudi investment forum where Donald Trump isn't necessarily expected to attend. He'll be spending much of his day in talks with the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. But top CEOs and part of his cabinet will be attending that investment forum, and a number of members of his cabinet are expected to speak at that investment forum. And there really is a buzz in the air here. People are excited. We expect about 200 or so US journalists alone to register for some of these forums to be present and around the state dinner, covering and reporting this trip. And we can see there the images of Air Force One landing at the King Khalid International Airport here in Riyadh. And he will be greeted by the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And will really, this is his happy place. This is a place that he is comfortable with. His family members will be greeted here as current and future partners. Donald Trump will not be criticized. He will be welcomed here with open arms. And that transactional sort of approach that he has to politics is something that the Gulf states, something that Middle Eastern leaders are comfortable with. So when he comes here and he has pushed them for $1 trillion in investments, and overall across the board throughout the week, we will see trillions of dollars of investments from the various countries here in the GCC. From the Saudis alone, he's asked for $1 trillion. He said, we've gotten a little bit older, Saudi Arabia has gotten richer, and he is expecting for them to fork out and dig deep. And it isn't clear yet whether the Saudi Crown Prince will up the investments from 600 billion to $1 trillion. But it is a place that Donald Trump feels incredibly comfortable, and telling his base, look, I'm coming here, I'm using this trip to bring back jobs and investment into the United States, which he has promised his base to the American people. So as far as both sides are concerned, this is a win-win situation. We'll be following all the developments here throughout the day at the investment forum, as well as the state dinner. And in the next few minutes, we are expecting Donald Trump to disembark from the aircraft and be meted and greeted by the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Wilf, for now, back to you.
Well, Yalda, we're going to stick with this as we wait for the top of the hour. And as you can see, the plane's still taxiing. It's so interesting to hear what's on the agenda, both in the days ahead in the other countries, but specifically Saudi, from investment to defence. But talk to us, Yalda, as well about broader regional diplomacy and that fairly seminal achievement of the first term under the Trump presidency of the Abraham Accords. What were they? Where does it stand now, and what is the target of the US in regards to that on this trip and during the rest of his term?
Yeah, you know, Wilf, the Abraham Accords, which really was a historic deal that Donald Trump signed to normalize relations with certain countries here in the Middle East. The big prize at the time was the United Arab Emirates. And, you know, behind the scenes, the UAE under the table had a sort of informal relations with Israel, but they wanted to formalize it. And because of certain personal personal relationships between Jared Kushner and a number of leaders within the UAE. They were able to strike that deal, which was at the time considered historic because it did normalize relations between the UAE and Israel. But the big prize at the time was Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia, even up until October the 6th, just a day before October the 7th, 2023, when those horrendous attacks took place in southern Israel, where we saw several hundred Israelis being taken captive by Hamas militants and were taken into Gaza. One of them was just released yesterday, an American-Israeli, Idan Alexander, as part of this US-Hamas exchange. Geopolitics will be a big part of the conversations here. It won't necessarily be top of the agenda because Saudi Arabia does want to still make this bilateral talks and to get some of those investments over the line. But like I said, geopolitics also a massive part of the conversation here.
It is, by the way, about 10 seconds till 8 o'clock. It is very nearly the top of the hour. You're watching Sky News Breakfast live as we watch the President of the United States arrive at King Khaled International Airport in Riyadh. The first official foreign trip for the President this presidency. It was the same place, by the way. He went on the first official foreign trip of his first presidency. And we're talking with Yalda, of course, as we await him stepping off the plane. Yalda, quick side question on this. Is Air Force One looking tired, in need of an upgrade? Talk to us about the controversy in and around, I guess, some of the enticements that might be happening in and around this trip.
You know, Wilf, like I said, I mean, this region is very much Donald Trump's happy place, and there is no doubt they are going to be offering him all sorts of lavish gifts alongside those big investments. And like you say, Air Force One is going through a little bit of a revamp from Boeing. It needs a bit of an update. And, you know, what makes Air Force One unique is the fact that it has special requirements, special security requirements. In the event of doomsday, it is supposed to sort of stand and hold strong. So the idea that the state of Qatar would be giving Donald Trump as a gift a jumbo jet that is valued at well over $400 million. Donald Trump was questioned about this. It's considered the palace in the skies. You know, I could much will pay you for this, or I could just say thank you and take it for free. And no doubt this has created so much controversy, so many questions around the ethics of this. And Donald Trump sees this as yet another transaction. Ronald Reagan put his aircraft in the Reagan Library, and Donald Trump says he will do the same once he steps down as President of the United States. He will put this in as part of the Trump library, and he won't keep it. But like you say, I mean, there are big questions being asked about the lavish gifts that will be offered. And this is customary when heads of state visit other nations. They are offered gifts. They are offered things that show a sense of appreciation. Certainly in the Middle East, they are incredibly hospitable, and they will want to impress President Donald Trump, not just with big investments and around technology. And like I said, the CEOs of these big companies are here. They'll also want to give him these sorts of lavish gifts. And one of those things that's caused a bit of a spark and controversy in the United States and across the world, raised a few eyebrows, is this Qatari jumbo jet known now as the Palace in the Skies that Donald Trump has been given. You know, Wilf, I was speaking to Michael Wolff, who is the biographer of Donald Trump, and he said last night, First of all, why wouldn't Donald Trump take this? Secondly, he was always just very annoyed and frustrated about, or hell would break loose if there was something wrong with Air Force One or even his own personal plane during the campaign. Very paranoid about something happening to the aircraft. So the idea that this very luxurious aircraft is going to be gifted to him by the Qataris is something that Donald Trump will very much welcome.
We're watching at the moment, Yalda, the steps approach the plane, so we're going to keep a very, very close eye on this. I guess he's expected to step off very, very soon. I can't identify at this point who's at the foot of the stairs, Yalda, to meet him, but are we expecting Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to personally be there on the tarmac, or when we say that he will officially welcome him, that's at the more formal ceremonies to come? Either way, I guess the red carpet, or as it looks like here, the purple carpet, is very definitely being rolled out for President Trump.
Yeah, absolutely. We are expecting President Donald Trump to disembark and absolutely Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, is expected to be there to personally greet Donald Trump. These sorts of things are not just important for Donald Trump, but these are very important gestures here across the Middle East for the Crown Prince himself to personally go there and not just greet the US president, the most powerful man on the planet, but also this is a friendship that they have built. Don't forget, there are two constants in this image that you're looking at right now. Donald Trump is back just as he was in 2017 for his first state visit to this country, and Mohammed bin Salman remains. And like you say, there was some controversy around Mohammed bin Salman. The perception of Saudi Arabia that the world has is one that has grappled with human rights abuses, with women's rights, with questions around autocracy in this country. Jamal Khashoggi, that journalist that you mentioned, the contributor to the Washington Post, who was murdered in Turkey, and the finger of blame was pointed by the Biden administration on MBS personally, has been a blemish on this state. And so for the last decade that Mohammed bin Salman has tried to transform this country, tried to bring about fundamental changes to this country. Certainly that record has overshadowed everything else for MBS, and perhaps this moment again is a chance for Saudi Arabia, for Mohammed bin Salman to reset his standing in the international community, because Saudi Arabia is now not just a regional player and power. This trip is very different to the one made 8 years ago. 8 years ago, it was about big money, big investments, just as it is this time. But geopolitics is playing a massive role. And a young Mohammed bin Salman in 2017 welcomed the fact that Donald Trump was, for example, stepping away from Iran's nuclear deal, the one that Obama had put together, President Obama had put together, and Donald Trump had torn apart and said it was the worst deal in history. We're now seeing the US administration in talks with the Iranians to come up with a new nuclear deal. And many people are criticizing President Trump, saying, well, this very much looks like the old one, the JCPOA that Barack Obama had put together. But Donald Trump is going to put his seal of approval on this particular deal. And what's also different about the situation this time and that Iranian deal, whether or not we're close to one or not, is the fact that this region, Saudi Arabia, has welcomed that deal, has encouraged that deal, which is a different tone to the rivalry that they have had with the Iranians for decades. They've tried to normalize their own relations between Riyadh and Tehran. So fundamental changes that we are seeing in relations between not just Iran and Saudi Arabia, but Saudi Arabia's now standing and role in the international community. It was here in Riyadh, Wilf, that in the last few months we've seen Ukrainian delegations arrive, Russian delegations arrive, the Americans have arrived to try and broker a deal between Ukraine and Russia. And then, of course, for the last 17, 18, almost 2 years since October the 7th that took place, this horrendous attack on Israel by Hamas. Then, of course, the violent and bloody war that still continues in Gaza. It was the Qataris that brokered that deal between Israel and Hamas to release some of the hostages, to come up with a ceasefire just the day before the inauguration on January the 20th. And I was standing in Washington. We had this almost split screen effect. On the one hand, Donald Trump was being inaugurated, and on the other hand, we were seeing hostages being released from Gaza into Israel.
Yada, it's fascinating hearing you kind of weigh up the negotiations with Iran, and I guess the question as to whether if there is another deal, whether it will be drastically better or not than the prior deal that he obviously walked away from. I guess there's similar debates taking place in the last 24 hours as to whether the trade terms that might end up with the US and China will be better than they were before or not. That's the big question mark, the negative take on the Trump presidency so far. Is there a positive take about the fact that the Abraham Accords might be reenacted? We might see more hostages released. We might see Putin and Zelensky having peace talks later this week. It comes back to this question overall, and in particular today as it relates to international relations and Donald Trump. But is there method behind some of the craziness?
Yeah, you know, Wilf, I described the Trump 100 days as fast and furious, you know, this almost frenetic approach to foreign policy. If I just sum up to you my flight from London to Riyadh, in the space of 7 hours, we all got on the plane having conversations with my colleagues, alongside my colleague Mark Stone, who's here as well, and he'll be going to the investment forum where those CEOs will be. What will be the headlines that come out of this? Because as we all know, Donald Trump's reality show, you know, continues, and we all somehow appear to be in Trump's world, and he plays things out for the cameras. He's not going to make a trip to the Middle East, his first foreign diplomatic tour, and not have headlines come out of it. For it not just to be about the big deals, the big investments, the big CEOs that come here and money flowing back into the United States in a win-win sort of situation for these Gulf states as well as the United States. He wants to have big headlines when it comes to negotiations with Hamas, for example. We're on that aircraft making our way to Riyadh from London, and suddenly news broke that the US is in talks with Hamas. Fair enough, through intermediaries, but within 24 hours we saw Idan Alexander, the last American-Israeli hostage, to come out of Gaza into Israel. Within the space of about 12 hours, his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, suddenly made the announcement saying, we're talking to Hamas. We're going to see, as a gesture of goodwill, this American-Israeli hostage released. The Israelis said, no, we had something to do with this as well. But the big question at the moment in the region as well is the fact that Donald Trump won't be going to Israel. The question around normalization with Saudi Arabia also lingers. As I said, on October 6, 2023, they were so close to normalization. After October 7th and the violence that we saw in Gaza, the Saudis said, we will not have any form of normalization until the Palestinians are given a chance at statehood. That is nowhere near on the agenda at this point in time. So it is a sticking point for Donald Trump. It is the big prize for Donald Trump, for him to say, I did strike up the Abraham Accords. Will I be able to do the same? He is going to put that pressure. And no doubt, Qatar, the UAE and Saudi Arabia will be saying to Donald Trump behind closed doors, it's been incredibly difficult dealing with Benjamin Netanyahu over the course of the last year and a half.
Yada, we're just watching Mohammed bin Salman walk down the purple carpet. Therefore, we do, of course, expect the president to step off any moment. I just want to bring you some breaking news that's crossed in the meantime and quickly get your reaction whilst we await this greeting ceremony. President Zelensky says he'll only meet Russia's Putin in Turkey on Thursday, not other members of the Russian delegation. That's coming from a senior Kiev official. I guess, Yada, that does suggest that perhaps through diplomatic circles, he's been told that Putin personally won't go. Will be great to get your reaction to that very quickly as we do watch President Trump step off the plane and historic pictures here with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman at the foot of the stairs, which is not something he does for anybody else. Yalda.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, this relationship is also incredibly personal. We can see President Trump walking down those stairs. And how could we forget the historic sword fighting, the luxurious welcome that he gave President Trump in 2017. And as you say, a historic moment there where President Donald Trump is being greeted by Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, at the foot of the stairs as he disembarks his aircraft on the purple carpet, as you say, Wilf, and really quite a moment as they walk down and start this, what will be a very lavish 24 hours in Saudi Arabia, and that will continue over the course of the next few days. He's being greeted there by some Saudi officials. And this is very much his comfort zone. He understands these sorts of personal relations. He won't be criticized in any way here by the media, by the locals in this country, by any of the teams here. He will be welcomed here with open arms, and members of his family have been treated like past and future partners, business partners across this region. And this is something that Donald Trump is very comfortable with the ceremony, the pomp and ceremony that he'll be offered here, the gifts, the investments, as I said, the big deals that he will be offered. And while big investments, big deals will be top of the agenda, and Saudi Arabia very much wants to treat this like a bilateral a meeting between the two heads of states. And Donald Trump very much sees Mohammed bin Salman as a counterpart, as an equal. You know, we often hear him criticizing European leaders, but it's leaders like Mohammed bin Salman, like Vladimir Putin, like Xi Jinping, that he sees as his equals, as his counterparts on the international stage.
Yalda, I guess the other thing to note is this extraordinary U-turn in status for Saudi Arabia and Mohammed bin Salman in the course of the last 5 years or so, not just with foreign leaders, which the same would apply to all European leaders. They've all had to gloss over the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, but also the foreign sort of investor and business community. You know, all of them cancelled attending a conference back in 2018-19. They are all there too this time. Obviously, only President Trump's there stepping off his plane, but almost all of the biggest CEOs and investors from America are already there for a big conference that's taking place.
Yeah, absolutely. Wilf, you have always covered the economics and the sort of the business side of these things. And I do remember that conference that one by one CEOs, big business leaders cancelled Saudi Arabia effectively over what happened. And it was news that MBS couldn't shake off for a long time. It was a dark cloud that hovered over him. But alongside that, Wilf, you know, I was just floating around Riyadh and I went to meet a few contacts, and they said to me just a few years ago, you know, the morality police would have deemed this meeting between you and I as unlawful. They would have come up and said, what relation do you have with this woman? Why are you sitting with her? And the fact that this country has now, in a very short space of time, over the course of almost a decade since this young crown prince stepped into his position, brought massive transformation to this country, and it really, truly has transformed. We think of Saudi Arabia through the lens of its past, and I'm just seeing Marco Rubio there, the Secretary of State, also the National Security Advisor now, as well as Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, standing there with Donald Trump as they step off the aircraft to begin this this tour, this diplomatic tour, where big investments will be made. But in terms of Saudi Arabia, I mean, back then, Wilf, $450 trillion in investments was announced by Rex Tillerson, the then Secretary of State. Mohammed bin Salman says $600 billion in investments. Donald Trump has said, I want to up that to $1 trillion. Not sure if that is possible, because that is effectively the GDP of the kingdom. But the kingdom is really interested in bringing Donald Trump in, winning favor for him. And unlike 2017, where this region desperately needed Donald Trump also needs this region, not just in reshaping the Middle East, but also Mohammed bin Salman. Saudi Arabia has, as we discussed, become a massive player in regional and global affairs. And you mentioned their President Zelensky saying that he will only personally meet Vladimir Putin. We saw the Russian and Ukrainian delegates come here and meet with the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, just a couple of months ago to try and broker some kind of conversation and deal. And Russia and the United States, for the first time in the 3 years of the Ukraine war, sat down round a table, face to face, mediated by Saudi Arabia here in Riyadh. But why the comments made by President Zelensky about Vladimir Putin is crucial is because Vladimir Putin just a few days ago, in the last 36 hours or so, said, yeah, maybe Russia is willing to meet with Ukraine in Istanbul. Let's do this in Istanbul. And immediately Donald Trump said, listen, Zelensky, you need to accept this and do it now. He, on Truth Social, in capital letters, as Donald Trump does, put down immediately, exclamation mark, go and meet or go and send a delegation. In return, Volodymyr Zelensky responded and said, I'll go personally. Why don't we just do this now and end the bloodshed? And I want to sit down face to face with Vladimir Putin. Doesn't appear that Vladimir Putin has agreed. And Donald Trump, by the way, has said, you know what, by Thursday, I might go to Istanbul myself if these two sit down round a table and meet. So such is the nature of Donald Trump's, foreign policy when it comes to it. Not only is it fast and furious, but it's transactional. And to go back to, the way that Donald Trump would phrase it, it's the art of the deal. And he sees putting up statements on Truth Social, demanding things from leaders on Truth Social as a way of leveraging his power.
Yeah, I just want to dwell on the scale of this visit from the American perspective. And this is the very wide shot. I don't know if we can go to the split the difference wide shot, but the people sitting to the president's right, I think in order, was Marco Rubio, as you said, the Secretary of State, then Pete Hegseth, the Defense Secretary, then Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary. I couldn't work out who was next down the line. The Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent's already there, I know, because he was speaking on CNBC earlier today. He obviously got there separately from Switzerland after his meetings with the Chinese over the weekend. I mean, it's pretty inconceivable to ever imagine the Prime Minister, the Chancellor, the Defence Secretary, the Business Secretary and others all doing a foreign trip all together at once. And I don't even think this happened in the Trump first term. I don't remember Trump plus Tillerson or Pompeo plus Mnuchin plus others all travelling together. This is the red carpet or purple carpet being laid out by these Middle Eastern leaders, but reciprocated and more by the Trump administration, all there, all together, along with the entire, frankly, American business community.
Yeah, I mean, Wilf, as you say, we're seeing top members of the cabinet there in person meeting with their counterparts in Saudi Arabia because, as I said, this isn't just a massive coup for the Middle East that Donald Trump has chosen to make his first trip here, where he is hoping to secure $1 trillion in investments, but also for the United States as well. He is sending a clear message to his base, to his constituents, to the American people. You know, it's not just an obscure, faraway land that I'm coming to that you only hear about bloodshed in this region. This is an important partner for me. They have a lot of money, as he said. We've all grown older. I expect more from this trip. About $450 billion in investments in 2017. Some of them, came to fruition. Some of them were criticized and said it never really got off the ground. That may happen this time round, but in terms of numbers, big numbers that are being invested, it is something that Donald Trump is looking at, and he's brought his, top leadership with him, because that's how Donald Trump also operates. It's all incredibly personal. He doesn't necessarily do the kind of bureaucracy and the hierarchy. He does it the way he sees fit, and that works for this region.
Yeah, as always, fantastic coverage. Thank you very much for joining us on that. We're going to have continued coverage throughout the day with Yalda, with Mark Stone, who's there in Riyadh as well, of this hugely important trip by the President, both to Saudi Arabia today, but then onwards to the UAE and Qatar in the days ahead. Potentially, of course, to Turkey too. We'll find out more about that in the days ahead. But for now, Yalda, thanks so much for that coverage. We want to pivot back now to the other top breaking news story of the morning. Police say they've arrested a man in connection with 3 separate fires, all at sites linked to the Prime Minister. Firefighters were called to Sir Keir Starmer's private home in North London in the early hours of Monday morning, and police now say they're also investigating a blaze at another property linked to him and a vehicle. A 21-year-old remains in custody on suspicion of arson with intent to endanger life. Let's bring in Sky's Alice Porter, who's in North London for us and can bring us up to speed with things that have developed this morning. Alice?
Yeah, quite a major update there, Wilf, that we've heard in the last hour, that this 21-year-old man has been arrested on suspected arson with intent to endanger life. And that is in connection with not one but 3 fires at different locations that are all connected with the Prime Minister. Now, I'm here in Kentish Town, and it's a property behind me there that was one of the properties that were targeted by what is believed to be the suspected, this 21-year-old. And the property behind me is owned by the Prime Minister, and it was very much his residential home before moving to Downing Street, where, of course, when he became Prime Minister. But it was also here along this road that there was then a vehicle fire that took place on Thursday last week. So on this one street, we've had 2 fires within just a few days, but also in the early hours of Sunday morning as well, there was also a suspected arson attack on another property linked to the Prime Minister, and that was in Islington, just a couple of miles from where I am now. And because of the locations and the properties that are linked to the Prime Minister, that's why the counter-terrorism police have taken on the investigation. At the moment, they are treating those fires as suspicious. Now, fortunately, no one has been hurt in these fires. The property I mentioned in Islington, a woman did have to be evacuated by the fire service. Fortunately, no one has been hurt, but you can still see in this street evidence of scorch marks on the street from the fire, and at the property behind me where there was clearly damage to the property from the flames. I mean, the fire was very much quickly brought under control in about 20 minutes by 10 different firefighters. But because, of course, the Prime Minister being so high profile, a public figure, it's no surprise that police are taking this very seriously. And it's not the first time that this property has been targeted before by protesters. So counter-terrorism police are leading on this investigation. And we've heard in the last hour or so that a 21-year-old man has been arrested.
Alice, great stuff as always. Thanks so much for that. More to come on that in the rest of the show. As you can see, we're joined by Graham Whettone and Mariam. We're going to discuss more about that story, but also the latest back and forth on the immigration white paper. After this short break, don't go anywhere.
show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's futures.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometres away.
So this is a major humanitarian disaster. Welcome back. Let's just remind you of some of the latest pictures we've just seen of President Trump landing in Riyadh, being greeted by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. This was just, 15, 20 minutes ago. It was unbelievably high profile and warm welcome. Of course, very rare for Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to personally welcome anybody that's visiting at the foot of the stairs, and similarly reciprocated with the President arriving with all of his top team, the Treasury Secretary, the Secretary of State, the Defence Secretary, the Commerce Secretary, all there with him, along with many business leaders and investors from America who travelled in advance for a conference being held there. Much more coverage to come of that trip and the days ahead of it to the Middle East for President Trump from the team, including Yauda and Mark, who are there to come. But pivoting to the other top story of the morning, of course, the news that the Met Police have confirmed they have arrested someone on suspicion of arson with intent to harm in relation to those 3 sites potentially linked to the Prime Minister, including his personal family home in Kentish Town. We're joined now by police commentator Graham Whetton, also by Mari, to discuss all this. Graham, what's your quick snapshot on what's been going on over the course of the last few hours?
Clearly a fast-moving investigation by the Met's Counter-Terror Command, looking into the 3 fires, linking probably the first one to the next 2. Properties linked to the Prime Minister, albeit it doesn't live there anymore. But fast-moving investigation, fire brigade will turn up first, assess the fire, extinguish the fire, and then establish it's suspicious, and that's when they call the police in. That's what we saw on Monday.
And, I mean, this is a bit confusing about all being linked together, but either way, the counter-terrorism police being involved, how significant was that? What kind of threshold would be needed for that rather than a traditional police investigation?
Because it's such a high-profile figure, and the counter-terror command have got the resources and the availability, and it's best to have them in at early stage of the investigation if there is any sort of links to terror groups or terrorist threat, etc. So it would be normal practice for the police to put them in at an early stage, let them assess it, let them investigate it. They've got the detectives, the forensic investigation, etc. They will investigate it first of all, and then they will decide which way the investigation is going to go. But they're probably the best people to deal with it.
Mari, just give us a reminder, the kind of what this led to Robert Jenrick saying on the air this morning about, I guess, the scale of threat that some MPs feel like they're under.
Yeah, so Robert Jenrick was asked about this, and he said it was important for anyone in public life to be protected, including their families as well. And unfortunately, you were asking him because we've had MPs murdered in the past, and many others intimidated and hounded by groups or individuals. And he also revealed that he'd experienced death threats himself, that his family had been intimidated as well as part of that intimidation, that kind of culture of intimidation. And he was really, really keen to stress that actually, even though people might disagree on, policy or political areas, that actually we needed to have a calm and civil and respectful space for politics and for politicians to be able to do their job, even if they may not agree with one another.
I mean, obviously, he also revealed, Graham, that he and his family had faced death threats and sort of suggested that that was not unusual, I think was his words. Is that surprising to you, or is it something that, sadly, the Met Police are all very aware of?
It's not surprising. Sadly, the police across the country are aware of it. The MPs across the country facing threats. I think there's been an escalation of attacks and threats towards members of Parliament, ministers, etc. So I would imagine there'd be another security review on the way at the moment around the PM, ministers and other MPs, another look at their security at any addresses. Bear in mind, I don't always live at the same address. So I think across the country, forces will be looking at security arrangements for their MPs and all ministers.
I mean, how this is where we've seen the pictures where Alice Porter was reporting outside this morning was obviously, the Prime Minister's personal home, but it's rented out to somebody else. He doesn't live there.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, I mean, there's not much that the police could do to prevent this sort of arson attack, could they? I mean, we wouldn't expect police protection or security at a house he doesn't reside at?
No, not a private address. It's where private individuals are living, but you can give them some security advice, guidance, awareness, etc. And that's probably what will be taking place over the next couple of weeks. So we'll review all the addresses, look at the actual individuals. Do they face any threat or risks? Ask them if they've ever received any threat or risk, then assess that threat, see if it's got any substance to it at all, and then give advice to people that are in the addresses or the actual individual themselves.
And Graham, in terms of what has come out again this morning and what the man's been arrested under which kind of charge and stuff, what does that lead you to deduce? It doesn't sound like it's a terrorism charge, or could that still be coming?
It's just literally an offence to arrest them under suspicion of arson with intent to endanger life, I think is what the Met have released. So that would fit with the circumstances. Arson with intent to endanger life suggests that there's been a deliberate arson attack and there's people present on the premises, so the intent there is to endanger life. So that's the actual offence he's been arrested for. It doesn't mean the charge will result along those same lines.
Great stuff. Thanks so much for that, Mari. Thanks for now. Much more to discuss with Mari in terms of the immigration bill later. And by the way, Yvette Cooper will comment on both those topics with us in about 10 minutes' time. But next up, members of the Scottish Parliament will vote later today in Holyrood on whether or not to approve an assisted dying bill for terminally ill adults. Joining me now to discuss this is the leader of the Scottish Liberal Democrats, Alex Cole-Hamilton, and the member of the Scottish Parliament for Glasgow Region, Pam Duncan-Glancy. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us. First off, Alex, let us know how you're planning to vote and why.
I've long been a supporter of my friend Liam's bill, and that is because, we have rights and agency covering all aspects of our adult life, save one, and that's our departure from it. Too many Scots are still deprived of the right to a good death. Now, palliative care is amazing. It needs to be available everywhere. It sadly isn't. But even so, palliative care can only take you so far. Breakthrough pain in some cases can be so much that it's just impossible to have a good death. This bill, very narrow in scope, is learning on the best practice of the 31 jurisdictions around the world who've gone before us. We're not pioneers in this, so it's safe. It's, I think, been well consulted on, and I look forward to what I hope will be a very good debate in Parliament today.
Pam, how are you voting and why?
Hi there, good morning. I will be voting against this hugely consequential piece of legislation. So I believe that it will not just put sick and disabled people in very real danger, but could serve to legitimise the view that with a life like ours, one of dependence and pain, we'd be better off dead. And if this bill passes, I think there is a real risk that it will be easier to access help to die than help to live, and I can't support that.
Do you understand, Pam, some of the arguments for why some form of assisted dying could have support?
Of course, I fully understand a lot of the arguments. I've spent a lot of time engaging it, but what's quite important to know as well there is so much confusion about what assisted dying actually is. Actually, if you look at the legislation itself, this is assisted suicide. Assisted dying is palliative care, and we don't yet have free and equal access to palliative care in Scotland. We know that in the region I represent, there are still many beds, palliative care beds, unoccupied because of staff shortages. So we know that we're not meeting people's needs at the end of their life, and we absolutely should do that. But the answer is not to assist people to take their own lives, it's to support them to live well at the end.
Alex, there are so many sort of slippery slope-related arguments. What is your pushback to that point, the idea that any form of bill, however perfectly constructed it is in this space, would start to legitimise the idea of suicide, for example?
Well, firstly, that's why Liam has chosen this model of bill, which is terminal diagnosis and mental capacity. You have to have both in order to avail yourself of it. And you couldn't expand that in scope without a further act of Parliament. I'm sorry to be on the other side of this from Pam. She is a passionate advocate for disability rights. So am I. But the research that we've seen in those 31 jurisdictions that have gone before us, conducted by Glasgow University, Professor Ben Colburn, shows that actually disability or people with disabilities are not harmed by assisted dying. Their care pathways are not curtailed. They're not getting access to care anymore as a result of it. And actually the vast majority of disabled people in those countries and in this country, like the rest of the population, support the right to end their lives on their terms should they have that diagnosis and fear what's coming.
Alex, as you probably know, in the debate that's been taking place in England on this, there's some criticism that it's not a formal act of government and being led by the Prime Minister. And on the flip side, there's some positive arguments that at least it means as a free vote for people. Talk us through the process there in Scotland. Is this similarly not a formal act of government, and is there similarly open, wide kind of points of view from the different parties, members and their leaders?
Absolutely, and I don't think it should be anything other than that. Issues so fundamentally personal as this should be an issue of conscience. No party could have gone into the election with a manifesto commitment to this and the knowledge that all their members were on board for it. And that's why I think we will see this afternoon Parliament at its best. We're debating, we've extended the session so that everybody who wants to speak can get a chance to speak. I think it will be finely balanced in the outcome. I am hopeful that this change will come because, as I said at the start, too many Scots are being deprived the right to a good death. This is something where public opinion is far ahead of the Scottish Parliament in its support for assisted dying. And I think that as we go through the parliamentary process, we'll have every opportunity to answer the concerns and queries of fellow members to make this as safe as it is possible to be, but to give those Scots that right.
Pam, last word to you. What's your view on the fact that this isn't a formal act introduced by the government?
I agree with Alex. I think it's important that this is a matter of conscience. But just to pick up on a couple of points, when the public and people are asked their opinion on this, 75% at a very, very superficial level say they think that the right to choose is important. But when you ask them what the definitions in the bill mean and what actually they believe assisted dying to be, 42% of them think it's about withdrawing care and 10% think it's about palliative care. Both of those assumptions are wrong. And when you explain this in more depth, people begin to get much more reticent and only about 19% support it. So when people understand the real dangers of what is being proposed here, that we are suggesting that when someone considers that that they themselves would be better off dead, we are asking the state to support them to take their own lives. And when you explain that to people, most people can see that that is a slippery slope and not one they want our Parliament to go down.
Pam, Alex, thank you both for joining us. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
We are going to take a quick break here on The Breakfast Show. When we come back, we'll be joined by the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
If there's anyone who might know how to fix Northern Ireland's devolved government, it's the American architect.
Changes in circumstance require changes in approach.
The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland.
I confirm that I am willing to take up the office of First Minister. My election to the post of First Minister demonstrates the change that's happening on this island.
Catholics and Protestants on different sides, now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19 and end up in hospital, religion's nothing.
People here are adept at finding hope amid adversity. That's the spirit of a place that punches way above its weight.
We help you understand the world with us. A toxic blue-green algae now poisoning Loch Ness. It's breaking your heart what has happened here.
It is.
This is a vital resource, a national treasure, now fighting for its very life. They are effectively surrounded by Northern Ireland, and that makes this the most unlikely of international frontiers.
If there's a hard border, I think it'll cripple the country.
Winter is coming. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama. Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record.
Sky News, the full story first.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional. This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Welcome back to the Breakfast Show. As we've been telling you throughout the morning, the Met Police have arrested one person on suspicion of arson with an intent to cause harm in relation to the fire that was reported yesterday at the Prime Minister's personal home in North London and linked to two other incidents that could be linked to the Prime Minister. Earlier, we were speaking to the Shadow Justice Secretary, Robert Jenrick, and he condemned the incidents and said the safety of politicians and their families must be preserved.
Well, it's obviously a very concerning story, and it's right that the police take it very seriously. I can't comment on a live police investigation, as I don't know the details. But it's important that the Prime Minister and anyone in public life has their family, their homes protected. You know, we have robust disagreements in politics, but I want to ensure anyone who chooses to go into public life feels that they'll be properly protected and that we have civility in our debate. It's absolutely wrong, disgraceful for any individual to take the kind of action that we saw against the Prime Minister's home.
Do you fear for safety of yourself and other parliamentarians, given what's happened in recent years, when little moments like this do raise their heads?
Well, unfortunately, there is a pattern, isn't there, now, where we've seen a number of members of Parliament losing their life, attacks on other members of Parliament, and now attacks of this nature. I've had protesters, I've had people attacking my own home, intimidating my family. We've received death threats. This isn't unusual. It's right that politicians, particularly the most prominent ones like the Prime Minister, have all the protection that they need so that them and their families feel safe.
The Shadow Justice Secretary, Robert Jenrick, with us there a couple of hours ago. I'm delighted to say that the Home Secretary is now with us, Yvette Cooper. A very good morning to you, Home Secretary. Thanks for joining us. The conversation with Robert Jenrick there, obviously stemming from the fire yesterday and the arrest this morning, but it was striking that he expressed he'd faced death threats and almost as if it wasn't unusual for an MP to face death threats. Does more need to be done on that front?
Well, I think we've seen, obviously, a significant increase in security for MPs. Obviously, we have had, over the last recent years, the appalling attacks, including Joe Cox and David Amess. So as a result of that, there has been an increase in the security support provided by Parliament. I think that is the right thing to do. And it's also, things can be increased by temperatures online as well. It's just important that in a democracy, actually everybody feels able to be part of that democracy, whoever they are.
I'm sure you will disagree with some of the comments that the opposition make as it relates to the discussion of the day on the immigration white paper, but is it important that we always only disagree with words?
Well, of course, nobody wants to see violence in any form, and not just in a democracy, in the whole of our country. Then it's why we have the work that we have done and set out as a government, which is about reducing serious violence. It's why that is part of our mission for safer streets. So, of course, we take any threats to security, any threats to safety, any serious crimes extremely seriously indeed.
Do we know about the motivations of the arsonist yesterday?
So you'll understand this is obviously an ongoing investigation. The police have my full support in the investigation that they are undertaking. The Prime Minister has thanked the emergency services. We do have excellent police teams in this country who do this kind of investigation, and so we have to give them time and space to be able to conduct investigations. You would obviously understand, as the Home Secretary, I can't comment on the detail of investigations.
Let's move on, Home Secretary, to the immigration white paper. When was the moment as a party that you changed your perspective on immigration?
Well, I've been talking really for 10 years about the importance of migration being controlled and managed in a way that is fair, in a way that works for the United Kingdom. We have had for generations people come to the UK to work in our NHS, to set up businesses, to study, to come here as students. But it's also really important that immigration is controlled and managed. What we saw over the last 5 years was this huge increase in net migration that was driven particularly by this really steep increase in overseas recruitment at the same time as training in the UK was cut. I do think that's damaging not just for the immigration system, but also for the economy, for our productivity as well. We can't simply be in a country where every time there is a skills or a labour shortage, everybody thinks the answer is visas and immigration rather than tackling the training, tackling the labour shortages here in the UK. So that is, I think, an important approach. It fits really with the sort of labour values and traditions that we have always had, and I think it's right to do so now as part of this white paper to bring net migration down.
But I'm interested, again, you mentioned there that fits with traditional Labour values, because it felt like yesterday the Prime Minister went a lot further than we've ever heard a member of your party go, than he's gone personally, and put him in a similar camp as some from the right. He said immigration had done incalculable damage to Britain, and also said that we risk becoming an island of strangers. Do you agree with those words?
Well, I think he also said that we're a diverse nation and that he celebrates that. And I think this is part of the issue here. It is possible to both say that we have had huge benefits through generations by people coming, being part of communities, contributing, and also that will continue to be important in the future, and also say there is a problem with the immigration system, and also say that net migration needs to come down, that the system needs to be controlled and managed, that we shouldn't have the big increase that we've had in lower skilled migration. Actually, we should have more investment in training in the UK. So it's possible to do both of those things. And sometimes this debate, people almost assume you've got to take the sort of one extreme position or another. And actually, most people want to debate the detail in the middle. That's what the Prime Minister was doing yesterday.
Well, I think it's possible to say the two things that you just said. I don't know that it's possible to say what, for example, you said in a December 2023 debate in Parliament with the then Home Secretary, when you were Shadow Home Secretary. You said, immigration is important for Britain. We benefit from international talent and students, on the one hand, and on the other hand, say that it has done incalculable damage to Britain. There is a middle ground with some of these points, but they are two ends of the same argument. They're opposite extremes.
But part of what's happened in the last 5 years is we had a fourfold increase in the space of 4 years. That is unprecedented. So that scale and pace of migration does matter. It does have an impact on nations. And also that sense, at one point, employers were actually being incentivised to recruit from abroad. There was a 20% wage discount that the Conservatives brought in for recruitment in shortage occupations from abroad. Well, that's really a sort of broken approach, because those are exactly the shortage occupations where you need to be investing in training in the UK. So it is possible to say both that we've had huge benefits and also that there are significant problems with that pace and scale of migration, and set out really practical ways to bring net migration down, to get the system properly controlled and managed so that it's fair and so that we don't have these challenges in the future.
I know you mentioned that you don't want to give a specific numeric target. Obviously, the Home Office has estimated that the measures announced yesterday will bring numbers down by a further 98,000 or so. I just want to clarify what the end goal is. We're at 728,000 in the most recent year to June last year. We'll see where it comes down in the next couple of years. Is your aim to keep reducing net positive immigration lower, or is your aim to end positive immigration and actually have a negative number?
Well, we need net migration to substantially come down. You're right, we've not taken the same approach that the Conservatives took by saying that they used to set all sorts of targets, they never met them. I think that undermined the credibility of the whole system. So we need to bring the net migration substantially down. We set out the figure you mentioned, that nearly 100,000, that refers to 4 of the measures that we announced yesterday. There are other measures on top of that, including workforce strategies, including further reforms on family and asylum migration as well, and also workforce strategies, the immigration skills charge and so on. So there are other measures too. And we're also already bringing the visas being granted, that is coming down. Those further figures will be published on that in just a couple of weeks' time. So people will be able to see the progress that we've made. We also have to recognise there are different kinds of migration. So there is a big difference, obviously, between illegal migration that we want to stop and international students who bring benefits to the country and is about supporting our world-leading universities. So there's different approaches that we need to take in different areas as well.
You suggested, and so did the Prime Minister's, further measures you can take if necessary. What are those further measures?
Well, we've obviously just set out the white paper. So the first step is to actually implement those measures in the white paper. But the point he was making is that we will keep this continually under review. We have a series of reforms that we'll bring in, and it includes linking the immigration system to training and skills for the first time. So requirements for workforce strategies. I'll give you an example of construction. Construction will still stay on a temporary shortage list because we do need construction workers, but we're also setting out plans to train 60,000 more construction workers here in the UK. That's not been done before. We've got to boost those apprenticeships and training. So you link the things together for the immigration system will be linked to these workforce strategies to boost UK training and skills.
Just to round things off entirely and come back to the rhetoric that was used by the Prime Minister yesterday. Obviously, it's led to some of your own MPs to compare it to past members of the right. I put it to Robert Jenrick this morning, and he agreed with the gist of the comments and suggested that immigration has been too fast and too concentrated in some areas. Where do you personally stand on those issues? Do you ultimately think that it's done incalculable damage to Britain?
Well, I think the white paper really sets it out. We think that net migration needs to come down. The pace and scale of migration became too fast. We had that 4-fold increase in the space of just 4 years. So we need to bring that down. We also recognise and continue to always recognise the huge contribution that people make where they come to work in our National Health Service, serve in our armed forces, be part of the UK in different ways. It's really possible to both value that contribution that people make and our history as a country, and also say, really, net migration needs to come down. The system has to be properly controlled and managed. It hasn't been. It was out of control, and the approach the Conservatives took. Let's make sure those numbers come down, make sure that we can actually tackle the skills, training and labour market issues here in the UK.
Finally, just a quick question on the number of unwanted departures that might be taking place, perhaps because of tax changes, perhaps for other reasons. Do you have data on that, and are they significant numbers of people leaving the country?
I don't know what...
Following changes to non-dom and examples like that?
No, and one of the things that we also set out as part of the white paper was the importance of being able to make sure we can attract the best international talent, because some of the highest skill individuals in the world who can be part of design and science and creative industries here in the UK, that is important too. Of course, everybody needs to pay their taxes in the fair way. That's the same for everyone.
Yvette Cooper, thanks so much for stopping by. Always a pleasure. The Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, with us there. We want to bring you some breaking news as we wrap up the hour here on Sky News Breakfast. It relates to Marks and Spencer's. You might remember of late the cybersecurity attack that they faced. Well, they're saying that customer data was taken in the cyber attack, and I guess this was perhaps already implied by some of the details that have come across, but it seems like it's being confirmed at this point. British retailer Marks & Spencer saying on Tuesday that some personal customer information was taken in the cyber attack that has crippled its online operations for more than 3 weeks. Of course, let's have a little bit back look through. They're saying that no evidence that this data has been shared at this point. Again, we'll try and get you some more detail on this. We've got a minute till the top of the hour. A reminder of the top stories, of course, involves the US President touching down in Riyadh. Just, an hour or so ago, just less than that, there is President Trump touching down and being greeted by Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. That was, of course, just an hour or so ago, and we're going to continue to keep you updated on that throughout the morning here on Sky News. And there's lots to come from his 3 or 4 day trip to the region. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman there rolling out the purple carpet there for the US president. Right, it is the top of the hour. Very good morning and welcome back to Sky News Breakfast. It is 9 o'clock on today's show. Trump touches down in Saudi Arabia, and we'll be discussing what to expect from his Middle East tour. It is Tuesday, the 13th of May. Your headlines. President Trump arrives in the Middle East this morning on the biggest diplomatic tour of his presidency so far. A 21-year-old man is arrested in connection with 3 arson attacks at properties and a car linked to the Prime Minister. Marks & Spencer reveals some personal customer data was stolen in last month's cyber attack that hit the retailer. And Sky News investigates the online drug trade for free 24-hour delivery advertised by stickers on Britain's streets. Very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. We begin in the Middle East, where Donald Trump has arrived in Saudi Arabia in the first stop of his 4-day tour in the region. The US president landed in the capital, Riyadh, a short while ago. He was greeted by officials, including a rare welcome outside Air Force One from the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He's due to hold talks there on US efforts to dismantle Iran's nuclear program, as well as the situation in Gaza, and very, very much more. Our colleague Yalda Hakim is there and sent us this update.
This is something that Donald Trump is very comfortable with the ceremony, the pomp and ceremony that he'll be offered here, the gifts, the investments, as I said, the big deals that he will be offered. And while big investments, big deals will be top of the agenda, and Saudi Arabia very much wants to treat this like a bilateral a meeting between the two heads of states. And Donald Trump very much sees Mohammed bin Salman as a counterpart, as an equal. You know, we often hear him criticizing European leaders, but it's leaders like Mohammed bin Salman, like Vladimir Putin, like Xi Jinping, that he sees as his equals, as his counterparts on the international stage. We're seeing top members of the cabinet there in person, meeting with their counterparts in Saudi Arabia, because, as I said, this isn't just a massive coup for the Middle East that Donald Trump has chosen to make his first trip here, where he is hoping to secure $1 trillion in investments, but also for the United States as well. He is sending a clear message to his base, to his constituents, to the American people. You know, it's not just an obscure, faraway land that I'm coming to that you only hear about bloodshed in this region. This is an important partner for me. They have a lot of money, as he said. We've all grown older. I expect more from this trip. About $450 billion in investments in 2017. Some of them, came to fruition. Some of them were criticized and said it never really got off the ground. That may happen this time round, but in terms of numbers, big numbers that are being invested, it is something that Donald Trump is looking at, and he's brought his, top leadership with him, because that's how Donald Trump also operates. It's all incredibly personal. He doesn't necessarily do the kind of bureaucracy and the hierarchy. He does it the way he sees fit, and that works for this region.
Yada there for us in Riyadh. Much more from her, Mark Stone, throughout the day and the days ahead of the visit there from President Trump to the Middle East. Well, back here, police say they've arrested a man in connection with 3 separate fires, all at sites linked to the Prime Minister. Firefighters were called to Sir Keir Starmer's private home in North London in the early hours of Monday morning. And police now say they're also investigating a blaze at another property linked to him and a vehicle. A 21-year-old is in custody on suspicion of arson with intent to endanger life. Let's bring in Sky's Alice Porter, who's on the scene in North London and can bring us up to speed with all the developments this morning. Alice?
Well, people here on the street, local residents, are absolutely bemused by what is taking place here on the street over the last few days, because there was a fire that took place on Thursday evening, and that was a vehicle at the other end of the street. And it seems to be there's been a series of different fires. There was the one on the vehicle at the end of the street, as I just mentioned there. Then there was one in the early hours of Sunday morning in Islington. Now, that's another property that's linked to the Prime Minister. That's just a couple of miles from here. And then in the early hours of yesterday morning, there was then a suspected arson attack on the property behind me, and you can still see very clearly damage to the porch, scorch marks on the entrance to the property. Now, fortunately, no one was hurt in any of these fires, although 10 firefighters came to tackle the blaze at the property behind me, a property which, it's important to stress, was the Prime Minister's, very much his family home up until moving to Downing Street when he became Prime Minister. Now, it was no sort of secret that this property was his property, but it is concerning, of course, to the authorities, and that's why counter-terrorism police have taken over the investigation, is that both properties, the one here and the one in Islington, just a couple of miles away, and the fire at the other end of the street was a car fire, all seem to be linked to the Prime Minister. So it's no surprise they're taking this very seriously, and they'll be delighted to have at least this development that we've heard in the last hour or two, is that a 21-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of arson, and he remains in custody, and he has been arrested in connection with all 3 fires. So we're waiting for any more update from the police, and counter-terrorism police are leading that investigation. And it's important to stress this isn't the first time that this property behind me here in Kentish Town has been targeted before. It's been targeted by protesters. We don't quite know the nature of the suspected arson attacks that have taken place, but what we do know is a 21-year-old man remains in custody.
Alice, great stuff. Thanks so much for that. Much appreciated. And Mari's here on set to react to all of the day's news. But the little bit of breaking news that's just crossed is that President Macron has been granted a state visit here to the United Kingdom. It's an invitation we're seeing that he's accepted. And it's going to be on Tuesday, the 8th of July to Thursday, the 10th of July. The release here saying that Their Majesties the King and Queen will host the President and Mrs Macron at Windsor Castle. And, Mari, this is interesting because, of course, there was much debate about when President Trump's state visit would happen. It sounds like, in all likelihood, President Macron will receive one before President Trump, unless there's something that's pulled out of the hat at short notice.
Yes, it does sound like that. I think it's interesting. It's important to say that, obviously, President Trump has already had one, so Trump is already almost ahead of the game because he's had one, whereas this would be Macron's first.
So Macron hasn't had a state visit yet?
No, as far as we are aware, this is the first time he would have had a state visit, considering how long he's been president as well. I think that is quite fascinating that it's taken this long, perhaps. And clearly it's a demonstration, really, of perhaps an outstretching to the European continent, to France, the EU, trying to smooth that relationship over after years, really, of thorny relations with Brexit. And
there's so many details to this. I mean, obviously, the King has had successful visits to France, to Italy, to Germany. And we are awaiting, in days or maybe a week or so, the UK's plans on renegotiation with the EU. Now, one can't imagine this would be confirmed to be happening if everyone's not very happy with those plans that are due to be announced, as you would expect if it's going to be a mutual agreement. But it's just interesting, the timing of this announcement. Also, by the way, whilst President Trump is doing his first visit not to the UK, not to France.
Yeah, exactly that. I think it's interesting as well because, like you say, it's indicative of perhaps things maybe a thawing of relationships, and perhaps things are going well when it comes to our negotiations with the EU. It's still shrouded in mystery, and we're still not sure about what level of detail we're going to get on the 19th of May and what will still be needed to be negotiated further down the line. Some potential bumps in the road around Gibraltar and our relations with Spain. We know that was spoken about yesterday a little bit, so it'll be interesting to see how that all pans out. But when it comes to our relationships with trading with the EU as a bloc, that appears to have really, really improved. And our relationships with cooperating and collaborating with France when it comes to small boats crossings. Yvette Cooper, who's just on the programme, has been blowing her own trumpet quite a lot about how much she's got the French to move on this because of the reset in relations. So this perhaps is a symbolic moment for Britain and France to have that visual embodiment of a reset and to say we can now come back together and be the closest of allies.
Mari, great stuff on that bit of breaking news. We're also, of course, going to talk tomorrow about the two top stories of the day domestically, which is, of course, the fire yesterday at the Prime Minister's personal residence and the immigration white paper that came out yesterday. And I spoke to the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, moments ago about both topics.
Well, I think we've seen, obviously, a significant increase in security for MPs. Obviously, we have had over the last recent years the appalling attacks, including Joe Cox and David Amess. So as a result of that, there has been an increase in the security support provided by Parliament. I think that is the right thing to do. And it's also, things can be increased by temperatures online as well. It's just important that in a democracy, actually everybody feels able to be part of that democracy, whoever they are.
I'm sure you will disagree with some of the comments that the opposition make as it relates to the discussion of the day on the immigration white paper. But is it important that we always only disagree with words?
Well, of course, nobody wants to see violence in any form, not just in a democracy, in the whole of our country. Then it's why we have the work that we have done and set out as a government, which is about reducing serious violence. It's why that is part of our mission for safer streets. So, of course, we take any threats to security, any threats to safety, any serious crimes extremely seriously indeed.
Do we know about the motivations of the arsonist yesterday?
So you'll understand this is obviously an ongoing investigation. The police have my full support in the investigation that they are undertaking. The Prime Minister has thanked the emergency services. We do have excellent police teams in this country who do this kind of investigation, and so we have to give them time and space to be able to conduct investigations. You would obviously understand, as the Home Secretary, I can't comment on the detail of investigations.
Let's move on, Home Secretary, to the immigration white paper. When was the moment as a party that you changed your perspective on immigration?
Well, I've been talking really for 10 years about the importance of migration being controlled and managed in a way that is fair, in a way that works for the United Kingdom. We have had, for generations, people come to the UK to work in our NHS, to set up businesses, to study, to come here as students. But it's also really important that immigration is controlled and managed. What we saw over the last 5 years was this huge increase in net migration that was driven particularly by this really steep increase in overseas recruitment at the same time as training in the UK was cut. I do think that's damaging not just for the immigration system, but also for the economy, for our productivity as well. We can't simply be in a country where every time there is a skills or a labour shortage, everybody thinks the answer is visas and immigration rather than tackling the training, tackling the labour shortages here in the UK. So that is, I think, an important approach. It fits really with the sort of labour values and traditions that we have always had, and I think it's right to do so now as part of this white paper to bring net migration down.
But I'm interested, again, you mentioned there that fits with traditional Labour values, because it felt like yesterday the Prime Minister went a lot further than we've ever heard a member of your party go, than he's gone personally, and put him in a similar camp as some from the right. He said immigration had done incalculable damage to Britain, and also said that we risk becoming an island of strangers. Do you agree with those words?
Well, I think he also said that we're a diverse nation and that he celebrates that. And I think this is part of the issue here. It is possible to both say that we have had huge benefits through generations by people coming, being part of communities, contributing, and also that that will continue to be important in the future, and also say there is a problem with the immigration system, and also say that net migration needs to come down, that the system needs to be controlled and managed, that we shouldn't have the big increase that we've had in lower skilled migration. Actually, we should have more investment in training in the UK. So it's possible to do both of those things. And sometimes this debate, people almost assume you've got to take the sort of one extreme position or another. And actually, most people want to debate the detail in the middle. That's what the Prime Minister was doing yesterday.
Well, I think it's possible to say the two things that you just said. I don't know that it's possible to say what, for example, you said in a December 2023 debate in Parliament with the then Home Secretary, when you were Shadow Home Secretary. You said, immigration is important for Britain. We benefit from international talent and students, on the one hand, and on the other hand, say that it has done incalculable damage to Britain. There is a middle ground with some of these points, but they are two ends of the same argument. They're opposite extremes.
But part of what's happened in the last 5 years is we had a fourfold increase in the space of 4 years. That is unprecedented. So that scale and pace of migration does matter. It does have an impact on nations. And also that sense, at one point, employers were actually being incentivised to recruit from abroad. There was a 20% wage discount that the Conservatives brought in for recruitment in shortage occupations from abroad. Well, that's really a sort of broken approach, because those are exactly the shortage occupations where you need to be investing in training in the UK. So it is possible to say both that we've had huge benefits and also that there are significant problems with that pace and scale of migration, and set out really practical ways to bring net migration down, to get the system properly controlled and managed so that it's fair and so that we don't have these challenges in the future.
And Mari's here, of course, still to discuss this. Mari, there's so many details on this. One might be the extent to which this will work and the extent to which numbers will come down enough that it may or may not please voters. The other is if they have made a U-turn in terms of the gist of their policy, and if so, whether that damages them as much as it might help them politically. And I think that's sort of at the crux of the final part of the clip that we just showed.
Yeah, I think that's the argument that's currently going on in the Labour Party. You've got Labour MPs on the left of the party who are saying that actually pandering to reform as they see it is only going to allow you to lose more and more voters, liberal-minded voters, to the Lib Dems and the Greens. And we are going to stop being the party of the centre-left, and we're going to start tacking to the right. On the other side of the Labour Party, you've got those perhaps in, for instance, seats like Dover that they won over from the Conservatives, who we know those seats have a huge stress factor on immigration, for instance. Those kinds of MPs, and maybe perhaps your Red Wall MPs, are on the other side of the argument, and they are worried about losing votes to reform. And this is what we've been saying for the past couple of weeks, isn't it? That actually Starmer has glued together this kind of higgledy-piggledy coalition of voters to get to this massive majority. But this is what happened with Boris Johnson, and this is what always happens, is you have that coalition, and then slowly but surely the coalition start to realise they don't see eye to eye on a lot of different issues, and the coalition begins to fragment. And this is really what we're seeing in the Labour Party.
So I just want to bring this tweet that's just come across from the Labour MP Zara Sultana, which was just a few minutes ago, and I guess it asked the question about how big a problem this is for the government, saying, you know, we all know the person in number 10 who thought they were playing 5D chess by reviving Enoch Powell's fascist phrase, island of strangers. Keir Starmer approved it, then parroted it, shame on all their houses. I mean, that's not a simple bit of parliamentary party kind of diplomacy and PR to put back together. That is a seriously angry MP.
Massively angry. And also John McDonnell, former Shadow Chancellor, he has also accused Keir Starmer of mirroring Enoch Powell's rhetoric as well. The difficulty is, I suppose, Labour won't be too worried about those like, for instance, John McDonnell, Zara Sultana, Nadia Whittome, because they are considered to be the usual suspects. If I'm not mistaken, Zara Sultana is still has had the whip suspended. So people won't be necessarily worried about those. It's when you start to get your perhaps more middle-of-the-road Labour MPs, those who don't tend to rebel, those who don't tend to say things too much in the media, when they start to say that they're uncomfortable, then they have a problem.
Right, as always, thanks so much for that great stuff. Right, time to get you up to speed on all of the day's other stories. And Leah's got that for us.
Thanks very much, Wilfred. Busy morning. A man jailed for murder nearly 40 years ago could have his conviction quashed today at the Court of Appeal. Peter Sullivan, 67, who was found guilty of killing 21-year-old Diane Sindel after she was beaten and raped in Birkenhead, Merseyside, in August 1986, but recent forensic tests revealed that Mr. Sullivan's DNA was not present in samples held from that time. Our correspondent Greg Milam is at the Court of Appeal for us now. Greg, just remind us what might happen today.
Well, Peter Sullivan has always maintained his innocence. He was in his late 20s when he was picked up for the murder of Diane Sindel. He was convicted in November 1987, sentenced to life, then with a recommendation that he serve a minimum of 15 years. But he's always maintained his innocence. That meant he wasn't eligible for parole. He's tried repeatedly over the years to appeal against that conviction. On one occasion, he was told that it wasn't possible to retest the DNA evidence from the time of Diane's murder. But it is a retest of that evidence that has now shown that he wasn't responsible for that murder. Someone else was. Diane Sindel was 21 years old, a florist working part-time in a pub. She was on her way home when she ran out of petrol and was walking through Birkenhead when she was attacked. The judge in the trial called it brutal, ferocious and obscene, the injuries that she suffered. And Peter Sullivan was arrested and convicted for that crime. But the expectation is that new DNA evidence today before the Court of Appeal will see that conviction quashed. Merseyside Police have already restarted investigating the murder of Diane Sindel. They have looked at that new DNA sample to identify who the profile belongs to. They say it doesn't match anyone on the DNA register as it stands, so they are asking people in the original investigation to provide DNA samples for elimination. So the investigation is going on because, of course, the question remains for people certainly in that part of Merseyside, if Peter Sullivan wasn't guilty of that crime, someone else was, and is that person still out there?
OK, Greg, for now, thanks so much. And we do have some breaking news to bring you now from the tennis world. Novak Djokovic and Andy Murray will no longer be working together. And Novak Djokovic said this: thank you, Coach Andy, for all the hard work, fun and support over the last 6 months, on and off the court. Really enjoyed deepening our friendship together. And then Murray replied this: thanks to Novak for the unbelievable opportunity to work together, and thanks to his team for all their hard work over the past 6 months. I wish Novak all the best for the rest of the season.
Great stuff, Leah. Thanks for that. Just want to bring you another tweet as well, coming from the Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch, relating to that top story of the morning, and of course the news that police are continuing to investigate the fire at the Prime Minister's personal home, and that they've arrested one person this morning on suspicion of arson with intent to harm. And this tweet just coming across from Kemi Badenoch. This is a shocking incident. My thoughts are with the Prime Minister and his family. No one should face these sorts of threats, let alone people in public service. It's an attack on our democracy and must never be tolerated. That coming from Kemi Badenoch in the last few moments. We know more on that and all of the day's top stories when we come back after a short break.
show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first.
Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display.
I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's futures.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Welcome back. A little bit of breaking news. The French actor Gérard Depardieu has been found guilty of sexual assault. The charge relates to sexual assault towards one woman. This court case has been ongoing for 6 weeks, and I believe the accusations involve 2 cases, so remains to be seen about the decision on the second one, but he has been found guilty of sexual assault charges in the first case in a trial that's been running for about 6 weeks. Right, let's bring you a reminder of the other bit of breaking news this morning, that Marks & Spencer has revealed that some customer data was stolen in last month's cyber attack. During April, we also saw Spain experience a blackout, which impacted nearly the entire Iberian Peninsula. And that happened just weeks after a fire in an electrical substation that suspended all operations at Heathrow Airport. And all those incidents raised concerns about our reliance on technology. And just yesterday, perhaps more pertinently, there was a power outage in London that affected the transport network and various corporate buildings. I'm joined now by Sir Oliver Letwin, a former Conservative minister, of course, and author of Apocalypse How: Technology and the Threat of Disaster. Sir Oliver, great to have you with us. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
There's clearly quite a few recent cases. Just first of all, your take on the news yesterday and the outage that affected the transport network in London.
Well, I think actually that was a fairly simple case of a fire and a substation. The Heathrow case also is a fairly straightforward case. The Spanish case is much more important because it indicates that we often don't even rapidly know why these huge outages take place. I mean, a very, very large part of Spain went black, and nobody yet knows quite why. And what all these cases show is the extent to which we're now entirely reliant on our electricity grid for almost everything we do. Transport, communications, every aspect of ordinary life depends on electricity these days.
Why are we more vulnerable than we perhaps were in the past?
Well, we're more vulnerable for a reason that the M&S story illustrates pretty well. We used to have lots of independent things. We had, many of your viewers will hardly be able to remember this, but we used to have a postal service that delivered the post. We did no such thing as emails. That was independent from the telephone system, which had its own electricity supply. That was independent from the gas system, which operated without any major dependency on electricity or communications, and so on. Lots of different things, each independent. Any one of them might have gone wrong, of course, for any number of reasons, but they wouldn't all have gone wrong at the same time unless you had a nuclear bomb deposited by a foreign power. And nowadays, we're in a very different position because all these things now are a sort of network of networks. They're all interdependent. They're all related to the internet. They're all electrically based. And so somebody who engages in a cyber attack, or if there's a solar flare, space weather, or if there's extreme weather conditions of floods and gales, or if there's a malign actor engaging in blowing something up, it's possible now to infiltrate and have very, very widespread effects across nations, even continents.
And is this something that's easy to adjust for? I mean, I know, as you write in your book, that when you were in government, you were trying to warn of this and suggest things to be done. Have any of those things been done, and could they still be done?
Some things are being done, and some more things can be done to make all of these systems more resilient, to defend them against various kinds of attacks. I mean, for example, a great deal of effort goes in now to trying to protect businesses like M&S and the big banks and so on against cyber attacks. That's all worthwhile. The point I make in the book, and the point I was making in a recent article, and the point I'll go on trying to make is, however good our defences are, will never eliminate the possibility of an attack or a catastrophe caused by nature. Your defences are never perfect. And so what we need to do is, as well as defending against these things, to equip ourselves with simple fallback arrangements, which mean that we can get by for a while anyway, while the electricity system is put back together and the internet is put back into operation and the banking system comes back and so on. And that's going back to simple things like standby generators and maps in your glove box and so on. It's not high tech that we need now so much as simple fallbacks that will get us through if things really go wrong.
So, Oliver, whilst I've got you, I just wanted to get your snapshot on the state of play for your party at the moment, the Conservative Party. Do you think that they've made errors since the last election?
I don't think it's so much a question of having made errors since the last election. I think it's the situation they find themselves in is enormously difficult because they're stuck in the middle, so to speak, between reform on the one side and the Liberal Democrats and Labour on the other. And I don't think that there is a clear strategy at the moment about how to deal with that situation. I don't think there's clarity about what kind of thing the Conservative Party is under circumstances that we now see of a large party to the right of them.
I guess a kind of concluding thought on this, who's more likely to be Prime Minister between Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage one day?
I really have no idea. I'm not a political forecaster or seer, and we're a long way from a general election. I think the important point here is that all over Europe, and indeed as we see with Trump in the United States, the populist right is gaining ground. And if you're to deal with that, as well as exposing the inconsistencies and the lack of grip on serious and sensible administration that these populists usually have once they get into power. Just look at what's happening with Trump at the moment. As well as that negative side, you actually have to have a clear-minded decision about what a party of the centre-right is about. And I mean, the party I would like to see emerge from all this is a Liberal Conservative Party that regains the centre ground by making clear that you can have a socially liberal and economically liberal set of policies that enable our country to prosper, but also be a nice place to live rather than one driven by narrow nationalist populist sentiment.
So, Oliver, good to see you this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So to come here on The Breakfast Show, we'll have more on President Trump's historic tour of the Middle East. Of course, he arrived an hour or so ago. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Sky News Breakfast. Let's get you a full update on the breaking news we just brought you about French actor Gérard Depardieu. Let's get to Adam Parsons. He's there for us live in Paris. What is the latest, Adam?
Good morning, Wilfred. Gérard Depardieu has been found guilty of sexually assaulting 2 women. They were women who were working behind the scenes during the filming of his 2021 film Les Volets Verts. One was Emily. We can name her. She was named in court. The other one is a woman known as Sarah. Both of them accused the actor of touching them inappropriately, of using vulgar language, of intimidating them. These were charges that he denied, but the judge in this case has said that his testimony was inconsistent and not credible, and that the 2 women were in fact completely consistent in what they had said, and he has been found guilty of sexual assault in both of these cases. Depardieu is 76 years old. He has made more than 200 films, and it is very hard to overstate his prominence and his role within French culture. He's considered a cultural icon, a man who's been lauded by a succession of politicians, presidents, and fellow actors. And yet for all of this time, there have been, for years and years, accusations of sexual aggression against Gérard Depardieu. These have now come to court. These 2 women have given testimony against him, and he has been found guilty. One of the lawyers for one of these women told Sky News some time ago that there were at least 20 other people who wanted to bring accusations against Gérard Depardieu. Now, the prosecution in this case have pushed for a suspended sentence. What is crucial here is that Gérard Depardieu is due to stand trial again later this year, accused of rape. And if he is now found guilty of that trial, it is almost unthinkable that he would not be sent to prison on the basis of having this conviction against him. A huge moment, I think, for the French Me Too movement, which feels that it has struggled to break through in recent years, that France has not taken seriously, in the words of one of its prominent members to us, has not taken seriously these accusations. The best friend of Gérard Depardieu is silence, was the words that were used by one of the founders of the French Me Too movement when we spoke to them. Now they have the triumph, the success, the vindication, the justice that they said that they had hoped for. The judge here had heard long testimony from both sides. Depardieu's lawyers had been extraordinarily forthright, had been accused of using provocative, inflammatory and sexist language in the courtroom, and yet it has not saved him. Gérard Depardieu, probably France's best-known film star, guilty of 2 counts of sexual assault.
Adam, as always, thanks so much for that. Adam Parsons there for us in Paris. Right, we're going to look now at the latest news coming out of the President Trump White House and all of what he's up to, including, of course, his trip to the Middle East this morning. To discuss this, in studio with me, Jamie Klinger, the Managing Director at Insight Global, and joining us from Chicago, Greg Swenson, a Republican commentator and partner at Brigg McAdam. A very good morning to you both. Jamie, I'll start with you because obviously President Trump has just touched down in Saudi Arabia after what has been a crazy couple of days of announcements, particularly on the world stage. Positively, pleasantly surprised by some of these announcements, whether it's potential peace talks between Putin and Zelensky or a kind of détente, as it were, between US and China on trade terms?
I kind of feel like the chaos of all of it means that the sky is falling all the time, so you don't really know what to trust, what to believe, whether or not it's peace talks that'll last a day and then he'll tell off Zelensky in the White House, or whether or not the talks with China will actually amount to anything. So it's really hard not to ping pong around the amount of emotions. Every morning you wake up and you're scrolling through what happened overnight, and you have no idea what it's going to come out to unless it's going to enrich Trump.
In terms of the trade deal, let's dwell on that for a moment, Greg. I guess the reality is, even if people didn't expect this scale of development over the weekend in Switzerland in talks between the US and China, that where we are now is still worse than where we were at the start of his presidency.
Well, I don't know about worse. Well, I think it's different. It's definitely a reset. But I think what's really important to President Trump is addressing the fentanyl crisis in the U.S. And that's a big part of the tariffs that are still in place. So you have 30% tariffs. You have the 10% across the board tariffs plus the 20% levy on goods because of the fentanyl crisis. If China addresses that and fixes that, I think that goes away ultimately. But, again, this is a reset. It's not really a trade deal. There's 90 days to accomplish that, to get to a deal. I think that they will, and it will be constructive. So this is, good for America, good for the world, but ultimately really good for China as well. If they're able to rebalance their economy away from a purely production economy into a more consumption economy, it will bring some balance.
Does it reveal, Greg, that both countries' economies are in fact a little bit weaker than they'd like them to be, that they have to back down in this way?
Well, yeah, I think ultimately, the greater good is a trade deal with lower tariffs or at least fewer tariffs, but also fixing the non-tariff trade barriers that are occurring in China. I don't think China could have survived much longer, given that they're completely dependent on the U.S. consumption. The U.S. economy, the U.S. consumption, or the consumer, is still 35% of world global consumption. And China's shipping, a third of their exports to the US. So the surplus country cannot survive a trade war. So I think it was really important for China to back down here. Was it good for the US to be in an escalatory trade war? No, of course not. But the economy is not dependent on trade with China at all.
I guess most people will frame this as both sides backing down. Jamie, ultimately, when you see some things come out of these trade tactics, like the trade deal with the UK over the last week or so, what's your take on it?
I just think when we're constantly playing games and then everybody's backing down, everyone's threatening war, we're in a dangerous spot where nobody is progressing and nobody is having the stability that we all need. The talk about not having any, ruining Hollywood, ruining foreign films, all of these tactics are so bullying. Instead of looking at world peace, looking at making malaria vaccines, making sure that AIDS continues to go, scientists continue to help people stay alive. It's showing who's the king of the world and making people kiss a ring, rather than actually progressing as a global scale. What
do you make of the trip and the arrival pictures thus far in the Middle East, Jamie?
Celebrating the new king of America.
In what way exactly?
Just, it's all about pomp and circumstance and very little about actually improving the world's community and improving what's happening post-COVID, what happens across the land. And everything they do, I'm not sure what's going to happen with the World Cup or the Olympics if you're not letting people in. Is that a way of being America first? If you're not letting athletes in, if your immigration policies and the way you're being treated to people that are not American is so xenophobic and so horrific as far as I'm concerned.
Greg, what's on the agenda for the president in the Middle East? Do you think that a lot's going to come out of this?
Yeah, I do. I think, remember, the president went to Saudi Arabia for his first foreign trip in his first term. He's all about the economy. He's all about, he's very transactional, obviously. So I think he's going to lead with economic ties with the region, both with the Saudis, the Emiratis, and the Qataris. And that will ultimately lead to peace in the Middle East. And that's really what he's about. He's an anti-war president. So, yes, he leads with economics. He is transactional. That's the way he operates. But that's better than the alternative, which is boots on the ground. So I think you'll see some really productive outcomes from this trip.
Is his relationship, Greg, with Prime Minister Netanyahu more strained at the moment than it has been at any point during his presidency?
I don't think so. I don't think so at all. His support for Israel is really unwavering. And I think you might be surprised and see even some indication that the Saudis will join the Abraham Accords. Maybe at least they'll have a discussion about it. So look, during the Biden administration, the term Abraham Accords was not permitted in the White House for the first 2 years. It couldn't be used in a memo or an email. They were so disappointed in a perverse way that Trump had a success with the Abraham Accords. It was one of his great foreign policy outcomes. And yet the Biden administration just did not want to admit that President Trump had that success. So they really set back the Abraham Accords. I think the Saudis would have signed up in his first 2 years. There was still that dialogue going. Unfortunately, with October 7th, it set things back. The Biden administration, of course, changed on that, just like, you know, putting the Houthis back on the terrorist list and many other things. But, you know, they didn't continue with the sanctions on Iran. I think there's obviously a reset here. President Trump has a great relationship, both with Israel and Netanyahu, as well as with MBS and with Sheikh Taknoun and MBZ in the UAE. So this is a really positive moment for the Middle East.
Greg and Jamie, thank you both so much for joining me this morning. Very much appreciated. We're going to take a quick break here. We've got more live pictures coming in, though, when we come back of the President's trip to Riyadh. And we'll be joined by our team there on the ground.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
You want to talk business? Meet me in the On-Board Lounge. Flying minutes, fly better. Thank you.
Welcome back. Well, QR codes are now commonplace in our daily lives. You've no doubt used one in a restaurant or a cafe or subscribed to a podcast here on Sky News. But they're also now being used to sell drugs. Sky's data and forensics correspondent Tom Cheshire has this investigation.
A simple sticker with an equally simple proposition. Scan the code and you can buy cannabis in broad digital daylight. It's as easy as shopping on any online store. Instead of back alley pickups, just add to cart. But Sky News has uncovered the complex web of Eastern European drug gangs behind it. The stickers have been appearing in towns around the country.
The way they're doing things now, it's crackers.
Steve, not his real name, was one of those who saw them.
And that's what led me to the site. I'd never used anything like that before. I'd spent most of my career trying to find it and take it off people in the prison service.
Steve made an order. It came the very next day.
Landed on the mat, absolutely stunk it did. I was shaking like a leaf on unwrapping it.
All the stickers have a simple QR code, a gateway not just to illegal drug websites, but with a bit of digging, to the criminal gangs behind them. Scan the code and it takes you to a site on the open web. We're not naming it as it's still available at the time of broadcast. It's slick and uses bright colours and brand names to advertise its products, with customers assured of next-day delivery. This cheerfully brazen online drug dealing isn't itself new, but for the first time, we were able to uncover the network behind this one. From the colourful front end to the black and white source code in the back. And here we found a long list of bank accounts and business names that are randomly selected when a user makes a purchase. From there, we could use publicly available tools to build a network map of the businesses involved, the people behind them, and how they're linked. Based on the activity from their Bitcoin wallets, we estimate they're making hundreds of thousands of pounds each year. All are Lithuanian nationals.
One of those companies is registered on Companies House here, so we're going to go take a look, see what we can find.
We didn't have any luck at either address. But then we got a call.
We want to speak to you about a business called... Have you heard of it? Yeah, it's an online business. It sells cannabis online, so it sells drugs online. 3 of the companies associated with it, they're registered to properties that are owned by your family.
She said she'd never heard of the business and invited us back to ask questions. This resident owns 2 of the houses associated with the bank accounts.
Just want to take you through this.
She said she'd never heard of the website, nor had any idea that a criminal enterprise was potentially being run from properties that she owns.
I know it's nothing illegal in my houses.
Nothing? And you don't think
Definitely.
that they might be doing that perhaps secretly, or because their names are on these sites?
You know, I can't say on behalf of them, but as far as I know, it's nothing in my houses.
She said that the 3 Lithuanian nationals had since left the UK. But it left us with another question. We could find this out. Why couldn't police? Tony Saggers was the former head of drugs at the National Crime Agency.
We've not only got an online market that isn't face-to-face criminal with its customers, but it's also supplying a drug that is a lower priority within law enforcement focus. And I think the combination of those things do sort of combine to make it easier for some people to get away with that for periods of time, but I wouldn't ever suggest that they're always going to get away with it, because people's time does come round.
We pointed out the website to the National Crime Agency, explaining what we had found. They said many organised crime groups selling drugs use social media and communication platforms to promote and sell their illicit produce. The NCA is working with partners across law enforcement and government to tackle drug trafficking. They suggested we contact Ofcom and the Metropolitan Police. The Met referred us instead to the National Police Chiefs Council, who wouldn't comment on the record. And all the while, this business, happily undisturbed, continues to sell drugs. Tom Cheshire, Sky News, East London.
Well, before we finish up our chat with the team, let's have a quick look at the weather.
The perfect climate, wherever the destination. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, after yesterday's storms, high pressure will gradually regain control and bring further settled conditions, but there's still potential for some heavy showers in the south today. It's a largely fine start for most, with blue skies and plenty of sunshine. Low cloud over the northeast of Scotland will burn back to coastal areas. It will become warm inland once again, with temperatures reaching a high of 24 or 25 Celsius. Eastern coast will be cooler as an onshore flow sets in. Heavy showers will develop in a line from Southern Ireland through to South Wales.
The perfect climate, whatever the forecast. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
About a minute or two left to reflect on all the news of the show. And I have to say, Mari, when we came in yesterday, we thought all the focus is going to be on the Prime Minister's new immigration policy. Yeah. Clearly, they wanted to make a big deal of it because they had the Home Secretary out on Sunday. I wonder if they'd always planned to have the Home Secretary out again today, and the extent to which, if they wanted to push back on the insurgency from reform, that they were expecting things to linger this way and it's almost planned, or whether this has kind of been a reaction they didn't expect in any way, shape or form.
It's hard to tell, isn't it? I think what's really interesting is you've got a situation where several Labour MPs are accusing Starmer and the government of being, much more like Nigel Farage than they would ever like, and that's quite an extraordinary position for them to be in as a party. I think there's going to be a lot of internal debate and discussion this week about some of the language.
And, of course, the threat from reform fails to fade away. It went from the elephant in the room to the elephant actually in the room and people discussing it.
Totally, absolutely. I think Nigel Farage is giving them a run for his money, and I think Labour are really, really worried about that.
Well, we are out of time here on The Breakfast Show. So much more to come with Gareth and the team from here in Millbank on Sky News Today.